Good evening. It's 5:30. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. We'll call the meeting to order, so if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item would be the adoption of the agenda. Just for general information, there have been some revisions, so be sure you get the agenda that's available outside at the door, not the earlier one that was posted online. Do you have any additions or?
Yes, I do. I would like to, D is what I have a question on.
Okay, so we'll remove item D from the consent agenda and move it to items for commission action. Any others?
No.
And no more additions for tonight?
Not unless you have some.
Okay. Well, at this time then I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I make a motion that we adopt the agenda with the exception of D.
Okay. I'll second the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Adoption of the consent agenda. So do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I have a motion to adopt to make the adoption of the consent agenda.
Okay. I'll second the motion with
the exception of
with the
D.
modification.
Yes.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Proclamations. Consider proclaiming May 14th through the 18th, 2018 as Police Week. Chief, do you want to address the commission?
I believe President Kennedy started this when he was in office, and he sets the, I believe it's the 15th of May, aside as the day to honor fallen officers, and so that week has been designated as Police Week. So across the nation, law enforcement are gathering this week or on that week to honor the fallen and honor those that serve our communities across the country.
Okay. Any questions for the chief?
None.
Okay. With that, then, I make a motion that we proclaim the week of May 14th through the 18th, 2018 as Police Week. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. I'll read the proclamation. Police Week proclamation to designate the week of May 14th through the 18th, 2018 as Police Week. Whereas the members of the Independence Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the citizens of Independence, and whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the problems, duties, and responsibilities of their police department, and the members of our police department recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence or disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression and intimidation. And whereas the Police Department of Independence is law enforcement agency which unceasingly provides a vital public service. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Leonard Kaflish, call upon all citizens of Independence and upon all patriotic, civic, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 14th through the 18th as Police Week with appropriate ceremonies in which all of our people may join in commemorating police officers past and present who by their faithfulness and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities and, in doing so, have established for themselves an inviolable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all citizens. I further call upon all citizens of Independence to observe May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day, to honor those peace officers who, through their courageous deeds, have lost their lives or have become disabled in the performance of duty. I witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Independence to be affixed on this 10th day of May, 2018. So let's take special time on May 15th to remember those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice in protecting and providing us with the security here that we've enjoyed. And we've been fortunate that we have not had any incidents of loss of life in our police that I'm aware of in the line of action. So, next item is items for commission action. We moved item D from the consent agenda. Consider receipt of property donated located at 309 Cypress.
My concern with 309 Cypress, I was familiar with the house that sat on that particular lot, and it was quite a process involved before the house was actually demoed, but it had been on the list to demo back in August of 2016. My only concern is the actual size of the lot and where it sits. If the size of the lot is conducive to putting another structure on that property, that was my main concern. It seemed to be kind of butted up against the rest of the property that surrounds it, and that was my main concern. Because if it's something that can't be used to put another structure on, then it's just another lot that we're maintaining, that we're mowing and keeping track of. So that was my concern about that particular address.
Well, I was concerned about the item too. Without a specific plan to move forward, I'm not in favor of accepting the property for the city just to incur another lot in town. There's a lot of other lots that are available for infill housing, and you look at the needs in some of the other areas. You look at the cost to build a new house, and there's a lot of people that would not be able to afford and relocate that are suffering needs. So I know the Housing Authority operates under our covering, but they're free to do with their funds what they decide. But I'm not in favor of accepting the property.
I concur with that. That was my concern too, just the nature of the property, the other houses in that particular area, and it just seemed to me like a house was placed there. Just, I mean, there was no rhyme or reason to it other than the fact they could put a small dwelling on that property, many years ago. I just didn't see it as a good fit for another house to be established on that lot. So, yes.
I just comment, Jeffrey. Of course, this is donated to the city, but it's for the Housing Authority, and they do infill projects there, and they do rehabilitation of existing structures as well. Apologize, April couldn't be here tonight. She had a conflict that she could better explain if they had any future plans for this lot. But they have their own, the Housing Authority, of course, they have their own board and their own money, and but they can't own property. The city does, so they're willing to accept the property, but of course it's on us. But
Yeah.
Well, you could maybe do it contingent that they would have to maintain it and let them know it.
Well, it takes a property off the tax roll too. If a neighbor is interested in purchasing the lot, then it would still be on the tax roll generating revenue. And, once we take ownership, then that ceases. And with declining valuation of property, I'd like to keep on top of what we've got and let a neighbor take that responsibility.
Is there a neighbor that's interested in it that you're aware of?
I know that I'm not interested is all.
Yeah. I don't think you're a neighbor, are you?
No.
Do you live in one of those houses?
No.
I think there's a couple of nice houses in that block, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe one of those showed interest in taking over that lot and keeping anything else from coming back, being built there, because they really struggled to get that lot clear due to the condition of the previous house that was on that lot. So, I'd say probably better than 50-50 that someone would be interested in that lot and buy it, just to keep that from happening and not have to worry about that being as part of potential blight again or left as it is now.
So to proceed, I could either consider it tabled or call for a motion and see, Jeff, which is, do we need to take a action to reject it, or
Can I say something?
you can say something?
The Housing Authority, when it was chartered, in the charter, so that the city would still have its thumb in there, it was put that the Housing Authority, even though they're going to raise money and manage and pay all the costs, could not own real estate.
Right,
So every time they want to own real estate, they have to come to the City Commission for approval.
right.
I don't think there's any request that the city spend any money, time, or mow or anything on this lot. I don't think that would ever happen. You might want to wait to hear from April. They have a separate board, and I don't think when the Housing Authority was set up, I don't think it was envisioned that the City Commission would substitute its opinion for the Housing Authority's board for usage if the Housing Authority on housing issues. Now, but the way it's set up, you can. So
Right.
you might want to wait to hear what April says. I have no clue what the plan is. I just know what the agenda said. It might be, she may have something that we don't know about that might surprise you. I don't know.
If we went ahead, we could either table it, or we could make a motion to move on this, and would that give the Housing Authority recourse to come back at a later date? Or once we make a decision on this, then that's...
You'd have to ask Sam. I think if you rule against it, not having heard from them, why would they come back? I mean,
Okay.
I can't speak for them. No. I'm not their attorney.
Right.
So then, have they ever not requested taking property? Every lot that comes up, Independence Housing Authority takes for infill.
We have had other lots that have been like in flood zones or different things that wouldn't
Okay.
be conducive to viable infill development that they weren't interested in and the city wasn't in. I think you'll remember, Leonard,
Right, there was one
that
on
that has occurred. I don't know how many times,
North
but a few times, maybe a
19th to
handful.
20th.
So, yeah, there has been lots in certain, locations that maybe wouldn't be as viable. And, I don't go to their meetings, so I don't know what their discussion was on this. But they may consider this neighborhood to be, one that maybe the infill would work with it being so close to the schools. I don't know. That you might want to give them an opportunity to state their reasons, because I'm not aware of what went into their decision-making on this.
I did have just a brief conversation with Craig Slorholtz, because the bank owns the property, and they're the ones that commissioned the demolition on it. And he expressed that, they were trying to get this done so that they could transfer the ownership over to the Housing Authority. What the plans are, that I'm not aware of either, but...
And it's, banks aren't into owning property. No matter what they have, they desire to get rid of the headache. And so we'll consider the motion. There no motion, we'll table it. Or do I have a motion?
I have a motion
Okay.
that we go ahead and not accept the property at 309 Cypress.
Okay, we have a motion
And a second.
and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is consider energy upgrades for Building D to be funded from Mercy Grant.
So we've been doing some work with, put together an RFP. This is going back to some initial studies that looking at the building D, the electrical consumption, and understanding that it was significantly higher than what the city and the commission envisioned it when we took ownership of the building, and trying to find ways that we can reduce and minimize that cost to the taxpayers that would free up money for other things. So we put out an RFP. We only had one company respond. That company was BCS, and their proposal is presented here. We've also had Carrie West of Westar and her team come in and evaluate this. We wanted to be very certain that we understood what needed to happen. We don't want to just go jumping into a project assuming that savings can be reached. So we felt like bringing Westar in, really evaluating everything. Carrie's provided a report, which we got to you last week, I believe. And so I'm going to have her visit a little bit about her findings, and then at that point in time, we'll have Steve Mankins with BCS come up and visit with you about the proposal itself.
All right, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity tonight to come and go over the report that we have been spending the last few months working on information, looking at details, running voltage recordings, and so on. Again, my name is Carrie West. I'm the business manager for commercial and industrial accounts for Westar Energy. I work across Southeast Kansas with communities and our commercial customers, as well as large industrial. We put together this report, and those that participated in that, I brought in a distribution engineer from Wichita, I brought in our East Region engineer from Shawnee, and then our regional operations manager as well, because I wanted a non-biased opinion of what's going on with the facility, what we see from an energy standpoint that could help the city move forward and look at different proposals. So if you'll bear with me, I'll kind of flip through the sheets and go through in general. So the City of Independence staff requested an energy assessment walkthrough of the facilities to, like Mike said, help identify ways to conserve energy and reduce your overall monthly bills. So I'm going to skip over general information about the definitions of kilowatt hours and load factor, power factor. Y'all can look those up on the report, but I will tell you just a little background on your accounts. You are a medium general service customer, so your monthly kilowatt demand falls between 200 kilowatts and 999. You guys are falling just a little over 300 with the monthly peaks on Building D. So I've provided some information on how our rates are actually calculated in that report, and you can go through that as well. But what I will say in looking at all of this information, just be very careful as you're looking at things that you may reduce your demand, but if you do not reduce your kilowatt hours, you're going to have a hard time saving money. And I'm just going to be completely upfront and honest with that. But I think for the recommendations that we see along with this facility, I think it'll kind of lead more information to you with that to better understand what I'm saying. So we've identified several efficiencies along the way in looking at the facility. We did a walkthrough with Rick and Mike and the engineers in our operations team, looking at every motor, every piece of equipment that had any sort of large horsepower attached to it to help come up with the foundation for this report. So the first thing we took a look at was the imaging center, and we knew with the MRI unit, CT scanners and things, we knew that was drawing a significant demand. With that removed from the equation, with that no longer in the facility, you dropped about 40 kilowatts right off the bat without that equipment operating. So that definitely made a change, and you can notice that through the voltage recordings that we've done. So some of the other things that we looked at, making power factor improvements to the facility, installing variable frequency drives on your air handling units. You have very large air handling equipment in the facility because as it was slated in its former life as a hospital, that is a necessity for a very strict air handling policy. Offices don't require as stringent air handling policies as hospitals do. So one thing we looked at, like I said, was a power factor improvement for the air handling units, and then possibly considering, depending on the variable frequency drives on those units, maybe installing a capacitor bank to look at correcting power factor that isn't addressed by variable frequency drives. And what that means, Westar Energy bills on a 90% power factor. The facility averages a little over 80%. So you're paying a penalty monthly for your power factor in that facility. So that is one recommendation, definitely, that we can take a look at. And so that would provide roughly about a $410, $420 savings monthly on your utility bill, just by correcting your power factor. And kind of looking through the rest, one thing we always encourage you to consider when you're looking at capacitors or power factor correction, always work with your consultant or your electricians to make sure that you're not creating additional issues. So make sure that you take a look at harmonics filtering, also take a look at some sort of surge protection. Those things protect you in the event that something does come down the line and happen, that it's not going to take out equipment on the backside. A common thing that happens with capacitor banks, a lot of times, if customers haven't installed harmonics filtering, you can actually wear down the life of your computer equipment quicker by having a KVAR corrector online. So that's something to keep in mind as you're looking at that. Just kind of looking at it, staggering the times of your large motors, the start times. When you turn on every piece of equipment in your house and it's all running at the same time, you're setting your monthly kilowatt peak. And so we recommended, to help control demand in the buildings, look at options to either stagger the times on your air handling units or try not to kick on your larger equipment in the building at the same time as the air handlers are kicking on, so that you can help manage your peak. And a lot of times that comes through an electronic system that manages that. You can do that manually. It really just depends on how you'd like to proceed with that. So those are just a few of the recommendations. Another recommendation is really take a hard look at your air handling exchanges and your filtering system, and determine what you need for an office versus what they needed in the past for a hospital. And currently, from our tour, it looked like air exchange handling was happening about 10 to 12 times an hour. Typical office settings are about 3 to 4 times. So there's a huge kilowatt hour savings that could be realized by changing the way your air handler system operates. So also consider looking at reprogramming your chiller system to bring in outside air. I know hospitals have some regulations that maybe don't allow outside air or have a different way of filtering that. That's something that you should definitely look at for the facility. And those are general recommendations from an energy standpoint. It's the big ticket items that we look at and say, okay, these are things that are going to make an impact on the facility and in turn will make an impact on your bill. So just some general observations. It looks like in February, like I said, you had about a 40 kilowatt drop when the MRI imaging center went offline. Your annual average is about 80.6 for power factor. Again, we bill on 90%, so you're leaving some money on the table there as well. In summary, we encourage you to look at different energy efficiency options. Although we don't have any rebates at this point to help pay for them, we are here as a resource for the city, and we're happy to use our engineering team to try and answer questions. And what I jokingly refer to as a sanity check, just to make sure that what's pitched to you is in line with what we're recognizing. So I would definitely take a look at those. One other recommendation would be taking a look at the offices and the spaces that you're using on a regular basis and on a high basis. So if you have lights that stay on 24/7, we would encourage you to take a look at maybe changing those out to LEDs. And as things fix on fail, replace with LEDs, because right now there are T8 fluorescent lighting in the building, and so there are more efficient lights out there as well. So those are just some brief recommendations from the walkthrough that we've done. We've taken a look at some recordings and we've provided those recordings, but I will open that up if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm glad we're having this conversation today. Unfortunately, this conversation should have happened 2 years ago. You know, Craig wasn't here, Mike wasn't here. Some people are. But if we would have considered, put a little more thought into this 2 years ago, we might not be sitting here today trying to understand how we're trying to manage cost. We seem to jump into the building, and then we were more concerned about, not concerned about how we were going to pay for it till later. So that's the situation we're in here now. My questions that I have on here, first of all, is this account, is it a group billed account, or each meter billed separately on its own?
And is it okay for me to release that information? Okay. It is not a group bill, and the reason it's not a group bill is you only have 2 meters, one for the chiller plant and one for the building D.
Okay.
So,
Okay. In the report that you also had, you said that, if I can get it to bring up here, bear with me here just a minute. In the examples that you gave here, you made a statement here, this is only an example of how reduced kilowatt hours affect the actual billing. This should not be used as a cost analysis. More detailed kilowatt hours and demand, KW, are needed for an accurate estimate.
yes. And the reason I put that disclaimer in there is, like I said earlier, because with the air handling changes, if you go from 10 to 12 in an hour down to 3 or 4, I don't have the amount of energy that air handler, that specific piece of equipment is using. And so without that information, I feel like I would be providing you a false sense of reality, and I don't want to do that. So if you have that information, I'm happy to crunch those numbers, but again, it is purely an estimate. And without knowing numbers of how many and how much, that's makes it difficult to provide an estimate.
So the savings that you're indicating here are
Yep.
basically an estimate until you have further information
Yes,
to get
this-
a little more precise?
This information that I have provided to you is an estimate only.
Okay.
So if I have more precise information, I can give you a more detailed estimate. I can't guarantee it's going to be that exact number.
Sure, I understand that. There's another thing with power factor. You don't want to go to the extreme and have a leading power factor. But I know, West, as you indicated, have a 90% power factor that we have to maintain. My other would be, they had talked about, and I think you had mentioned here about lighting upgrades. They had talked about one time making some other changes in the building. And then what I've looked at on phase 1 and phase 2, I don't know whether we want to get into that right now or not, or maybe wait for the presentation.
Right.
Okay. I guess basically these are the same things I told people when I worked for Westar. Stagger your motor load. Don't turn on anything unnecessary that you don't need. Make your upgrades where possible. Try to conserve where you can. Improve your power factor. I mean, it's just pretty standard stuff that you do to try to reduce your bill. And this is based on current rates, and we all know that these rates aren't going to be the same a year from now or 2 years from now. They will continue to go up. So we understand that nothing is constant, especially utility rates.
I will give you a heads up. If the merger is approved, Kansas has agreed to a settlement of a 5-year rate moratorium on base rates. So not that that's here nor there in this discussion, but something to keep in mind as well as we move forward with efficiencies in the merger.
So when you're talking about base rate, explain that, what that moratorium actually.
Your base rate is the customer charge,
Okay.
and the base rates for all of the fixed costs on your monthly bill.
Okay.
So,
Okay. A little clarification for people that
Absolutely.
maybe doesn't understand. Because they're
Definitely.
thinking 5-year, no rate increase.
Yep.
It's not.
Not
that's-
not exactly.
That's not
The riders,
exactly
I was going to say,
true.
the riders on the bill are not affected by that. That's why I always use the caveat of a base rate.
Yes.
And that is if the merger is approved. So that's always something to keep in mind. But kind of going back to your power factor, 90% is an industry standard between 90 and 95%.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few customers that have chosen to go above that. It really does not benefit you. It usually costs you more and doesn't really benefit you at that point. So something to keep in mind as well.
Right. Well, I like the presentation that you'd sent. I had a chance to look at it, and the difference between the small general service and the medium. And a good point was that your kilowatt hour usage, if you don't drop that any, you could actually end up paying a lot more money. And it's
Exactly.
basically due to the cost of the kilowatt hour
It
on
is.
that small general service versus what the kilowatt hour would be on the medium general
It
service.
is.
So,
Yes.
That's all I have, at least I can think of right now.
So the demand, once you set the demand, you pay based upon your peak.
Yes.
The power factor then, 90% is based on the billing. You might explain power factor a little.
Okay, power factor is pretty complicated to get into, but I will
Give
give you
it the layman like.
the very
I gotta write
layman's
a check.
terms that I like to go through because I'm not highly technical, but the very layman's terms is as you're starting motors, you need additional energy to generate to get those motors excited and going. So you have a higher intake coming in, more power coming in at the start of that motor than when it levels off and runs constant. So we have to provide you at your highest peak of the month, and that is at that power factor. So if you have a bad power factor, you're going to be paying more on your demand because it does affect your billing demand.
Okay.
So
So you're
that's-
just relating to equipment startups
you're
for your
looking-
power factor?
Yes. It's looking at reactive power versus active power. So,
A good example would be Sawmill over at St. Paul. When I'd go do checks over there, their power factor would be 50%.
yeah.
Because when that draws and actually does work, then you see that improvement in that power factor. But as long as it's sitting there energized, but it's not doing any work, it's a drawdown on the system. So they notoriously have bad power factor, and that's just an example. There's plenty more, but,
Definitely.
and that demand, once you set it, it's measured on a 15-minute basis. So if the meter reader comes by today at 8 o'clock in the morning and he reads the demand and he resets it, 15 minutes later, you set that peak, then, and you don't exceed that peak for the next 29 days, 23 3/4 hours, you're billed on that peak demand. Once you set it, then that's what you're going to be billed on for that, so.
Yes, because we are required to provide you with the maximum amount of power that you require for your facility for that.
Right.
So. Any
I
other
don't have
questions?
any other questions.
All right.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and with that, I will introduce Steve Mankins with BCS.
Well, thank you for having me tonight again. So good to
Yes.
see you. My name's Steve Mankins. I'm with Building Controls and Services. We're here because we did the control work in the hospital when it was the hospital. So we've got a lot of standing history with the Mercy organization and the years of service. So when you guys took over the building, the operation was still just like a hospital. We moved into it and nothing changed mechanically in here. So let's go through a few things. As a refresher, this presentation here is one very similar, just modified a little bit, similar to what we did a couple of years ago. So activities to date, we did a utility bill analysis, and saw what we were using, dollars per square foot, BTUs per square foot, put it against the Energy Star database, looked at things. The overall, the hospital at the time was about $3 a square foot, which is great for a hospital. We like to see them down around $2.50 a square foot. And usually you can do that with the lighting upgrades and some small things. And an office building, a school, an office building, something that is running normal 12-hour day operations, that would be considered very, very high. So we dug in, and knowing that it was a hospital, we dug in to look and see what all those root causes were to help explain those. So we did the site visit, reviewed all the plans. Again, we had a lot of the history of the building, so we knew what was going on with it. We got with the maintenance team, Rick, and he's done a great job with the place. So my hat's off to him for running the operation the way he has for the last couple of years. He's done a lot of things manually to help control the utility costs. So great job on Rick's part. Then we finally put together a pricing exercise to see what it would take to make some small improvements that would impact the energy cost the most. So we looked at different opportunities. One was definitely modify what was a hospital HVAC into an office HVAC. Reduce the airflow changes. Kerry talked a little bit about that. Hospitals require a lot more air changes than a standard office building. Reset chilled water temps. A hospital requires 45-degree cooling going on all the time for the different patient areas, surgery, procedure rooms. The doctors are all gowned up, and they want it nice and cool in there. So the central plant is made to produce 45 to 42-degree chilled water. So there's ways we can control that better, more efficiently. So reset those chilled water temps to accommodate more of an office environment. We talked about modifying the constant volume air handlers to VAV air handlers. That's the addition of the VFDs that would then provide soft starts that eliminates the peak demand that you hit when you start all that equipment at the same time. A standard three-phase induction motor uses 3 to 5 times its full nameplate amps on startup. So when you start all those things up all at the same time, which Rick does not do, mind you, it can cause a pretty good sized peak in the building and the electrical profile. So VFDs have great energy savings associated with them. When you get into the fan curve infinity law, where you can reduce the speed of that fan, you bring that guy down to 55 hertz, 54 hertz, you reduce it about 10%, you can get about 30% of your electrical motor savings that way. So just by reducing that, you can make a huge impact. The economizer operation, we want to expand that, economizer operation. Now, when I refer to economizer operation, that's where we get free cooling. We use outside air to cool the building instead of firing up the central plant to get our needed cooling. Some of the air handlers are capable of having that right now today with very little sheet metal modifications. The OR doesn't have enough exhaust, so there's some sheet metal modifications that would have to be in that one. So not a big deal, but it would definitely make the operation better. And optimize the schedules. There's things that we can do that's called optimum start-stop time optimization. It's a way of looking at the temperatures in the building, look at the temperatures outside, know how long it takes to bring the building up to temperature or down to temperature, depending on whether you're in heating or cooling mode, and then start that no sooner than it needs to be started and turn it off as soon as it can be turned off. So anytime you can turn off a piece of equipment, it doesn't use electricity. This slide here talks about the savings with a frequency drive. A typical frequency drive will pay itself back in about 8 months. Just doing that by itself, putting it on there and reducing it down to 54 hertz. So most of the time you will never know the occupants will never know that you've done that, and it has a huge energy saving. The areas in the building, there are 5 air handlers in the building that currently don't have frequency drives on them. So here we just took some floor plans that we had from the BAS system and colorized them to show the air handlers and the areas that the air handlers serve. But down in the lower level, we propose installing a VFD on air handler 11. That'll stop that inrush current on startup, and then install a VRF system, a mini split on the computer room, the IT closet downstairs. That's one of those things that's a very small space that drives the chiller operation 24/7. If we have to cool the servers in that server room, it means we've got to run the chiller all the time. So that small expense of adding an air conditioner to that space now means we can shut off a huge load at night. We can shut off the cooling towers, the associated pumps, the chilled water, the chillers. We can turn all those things off at night and still maintain the computer system. So some of the reset control strategies that we've looked at here is they're all listed here. So a duct static pressure reset, a discharge air temp reset, comparative enthalpy economizer. I'm going to come back to these in a minute and kind of explain a little bit of them. Single zone VAV AHU application, and then a reset of the outside air levels to match the occupancy level using CO2 sensors. So duct static pressure reset, that and single zone VAV go hand in hand together. If you take a air handler that's in here, it's a constant volume air handler. So all that air goes down through that duct, constant speed, delivers to the space, and then there are reheat coils out there maintaining the temperature in the space. So we're putting 55-degree air off that air handler 24/7. Now Rick may have some things scheduled at night, so it might not be 24/7 any longer. But if we can reset the duct static pressure based on the demand in the space, we can slow the fans down even more. So instead of being at 60 hertz or full speed, when we say we just drop it down to 54 hertz, we get our savings all the time. We limit at that. Then we, based on the temperature in the space and the CO2 levels, we can drop that even further. So we might be able to run a fan as low as 30 hertz and still provide enough air to manage the space. So that's going to take some tweaking and tuning to be able to know what that is, because one of the things you have is your ductwork is big ductwork, big constant volume ductwork, and when we slow the fan down, that slows all that velocity down, so you don't deliver the air to all the ends of the ductwork the way you do today. So there would have to be some tuning with that. Comparative enthalpy economizer. That is where you look at the outside temp and humidity, and you look at the inside temperature and humidity, and you decide whether the outside air has fewer BTUs in it, and you can bring that inside, so you can economize much longer when you're doing a comparative enthalpy economizer. A lot of times if you do just a sensible economizer where you're looking at the outside air temp, if that air handler wants 55-degree discharge air, when the outside air temp is above 55, then we have to go off the economizer and go back to return air. So now we're returning, let's say, 75-degree air to the space. That chilled water coil has to cool 75-degree air to deliver it to the space. We drop it 20 degrees across that coil. If we can use more outside air, then we can save more chiller energy. So that's comparative economizer, comparative enthalpy economizer. Single zone VAV is just basically resetting the fan, the air volume based on the space. When you monitor your CO2 level in the space, CO2 is what we all breathe, or exhale. When that's in the space, then that's what gives us our headaches, and we start yawning, and we talk about it a lot in the schools. With 30 kids in a classroom, you want them to have the best learning environment. Well, when you're in a business environment, you want people to be at their peak also. So by keeping the right amount of CO2 level in the space, then we can reduce the outside air and keep those levels down to 900 parts per million. And it's just a better work environment. So people are more productive. There's a lot of studies that are associated with that. So anyhow, those are the things that we would do to the air handlers to optimize their performance. We looked at the first floor, and you'll see a lot of things are exactly the same thing here. Put the VFDs on air handler 10 and air handler 9, schedule the zones to match occupancy, and then of course all the same energy strategies on the air handlers. Up on the second floor, VFDs on both air handlers 12 and 13. There are currently return VFDs on the return fans, and we're using that to control building pressure. So we can modulate those based on how much outside air is coming in there. So we did that a number of years back. Once again, same things, match the schedules to the occupancy of the building, and do the same energy strategies on those air handlers. The chiller plant, that's its beast in itself. Of course, it was sized and put in for the full hospital. Right now, you've got one chiller out there that could easily handle this building pretty much any time. There's some things that happen when we reduce our load in the building. We reduce a load out there in the chiller plant. When we reduce too much load in the building, now we have the potential of short cycling a chiller out there. The chillers can turn on and off based off of what's called their approach temperature. When the return water temp is coming back to the chiller and it's too close to its set point, then it says, hey, there's no need for cooling, I'm going to shut off. So one of the hardest things to do on a chiller is to start and stop that thing multiple times a day. The technology is getting better. These are newer. They're not brand new. They don't have frequency drives on them. They don't have some of the latest technology on them. But we still want to minimize our starts and stops on those chillers. So that they will shorten the life of the starters that are in there. We can talk about the hours on those machines. I think they're probably in the 12 to 15,000 hour range now. Down the road, when they get up to over 50,000 hours, you're going to have some expense associated with maintaining those chillers. Train recommends above 50,000 hours to rebuild their motors. Pull it off, send it to the factory, rewind the blades. Yes?
The cost of the chiller, this size chiller.
Based on a per ton price, you could spend $2,500 per ton for that chiller. I can tell you that we just recently purchased, and BCS purchased a 180 ton air-cooled chiller. So that no cooling tower. It's got the much like what's on our home, just an air-cooled condenser on it. And that chiller was about $80,000. So that wasn't installed, but that was the cost on that. So
chiller.
But you know that down the road, if something happened to those chillers, that would be something that you might want to consider. So not anything we're looking at right now. They're great chillers. They do a great job for you. As long as you maintain them.
So you should get 50,000 hours out of them.
Yeah.
As long as they're properly maintained.
Yep. And you can go beyond that. I've seen chillers out there at 70,000 hours. I've also seen chillers get to 60,000 hours and the motor short out. And now you're going to spend $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to make that kind of repair. So that's one of the things we want to watch out is make sure that we don't short cycle the central plant. But we do want to turn it off. If we have the opportunity on a nice cool day, we don't want to see that running out there. That's a huge energy consumer out there. So firm believer in off saves money. So,
And that does provide your dehumidification too, though, doesn't it?
it does. And you've got to drive that water temp down low enough to typically 45 degrees to do the dehumidification that you need to do.
So the temperature between, you're only talking a few degrees. If it's chilling it down to 42 or 43 degrees now for the OR area, and you're going to chill it to 45 degrees, you're not looking at much temperature difference. So
Well, we may be able to reset this from 45 all the way up to 55. I've had customers that have been beyond that in the lightly loaded times. So instead of just locking it at 42 to 45, let it modulate automatically based on the load in the building.
and the humidity outside, because you don't want 55-degree chilled water with 98% humidity.
That is correct. That is correct. That's where you can look at what the inside humidity conditions are, and you can reset that chilled water temp. Yes, sir. And Carrie talked about all this, so I don't need to go into these things. She did that very well. So now, what questions do you have for me?
I'm looking at the Building D upgrade, project Phase 1 and Phase 2. And this is an estimate of a projected savings of Phase 1 of 25% with a projected cost of $163,457. And then a Phase 2, I'm going to go with the engineer. I don't have the letter brought up here right now, but they're looking at even spending an additional amount of money of $482,000 plus would only negate that savings up from 25 to 33%, and that's still an estimate. That's
Just an
not
estimate,
that's
yes.
not a firm price or a firm statement to make, I guess.
Correct.
And then the payback of Phase 1 and 2, 7 years. For Phase 1, the payback's 38 months. We're in the process of moving toward a 1916 City Hall that we're trying to seal the envelope on. And you're saying, well, you could potentially save $54,805. But if you're going to spend $163,000 and the payback's 38 months, and if you're not going to be in the building 38 months from now, then you spend $163,000. Granted, it's not money that the city's put forward, it's what Mercy's put forward, but you're basically using part of $500,000 that they provided to basically cover part of your electrical cost
Yes.
to fund this. And the end result is we vacate the building, and then someone else will take the building over. And the building, what I would value the building would be, it's only going to be as priced as what a buyer is willing to pay for it. I may think the building is worth $4 or $5 million. A buyer may come in and say, it's a hospital. I'll offer you something considerably less. So on one hand, we're not spending, in a sense, our money, but it is our money. It's $500,000 that we've been given to move toward ambulatory services.
Mm-hmm.
So do we want to spend part of that money in a building that the plans are not long-term for us, and use that money toward funding something that we're going to have to build? We're going to have to make improvements on the 1916 City Hall. We still need to come up with funding of a public safety building for the personnel. So, I can understand your point, what you're driving to, that maybe it would be wise to use that $500,000 for something else. my point is, when I made my opening statement, is we should have had this conversation over 2 years ago. We wouldn't have been in the situation we are now. But we are,
Yep.
and this is the aftermath of all that, and this is what we're gonna have to deal with. But we've got limited resources. And at some point in time, we just have to say, enough's enough. We're gonna have to find a way to start living within what we generate and start restructuring. If this is gonna be special use sales tax that we're gonna drive the bus that's gonna make these improvements down the road, then we need to start dedicating that money toward projects down the future, so we don't find ourselves having to come up with $1 million here or $1 million there for something that it's built into the budget, that over a period of time, we'll have enough money to make these purchases, because we're paying all this sales tax. So let's take full advantage of it and use it to fund these projects. The easy way would be to go and borrow money. And if that's the case, then you don't need us here. If all you want to do is borrow money, I could be somewhere else. I don't have to be here. So,
Well, I think you kind of defined it when you started. You said this was designed as a hospital, and now it's looking at a business occupancy. We're taking something that is and trying to make it what it isn't. That when you design HVAC systems, and I'm trying to recall on actual design memory from 40 years ago, but you look at the load in your space and the air exchanges you need, and it seems like that the duct size creates static pressure that helps to move the air from one point to another, which you mentioned and related the duct size. And it's all based upon pressure from the air handler. Now, when you slow down the pressure, you lose your static pressure that helped move the air down the ductwork. And now you're, like you said, there's some tweaking that has to be done. And that's what I say. We're taking something that it is a hospital. It is a hospital HVAC system. And we're trying to make it an office system, which to make an office system, you start with your loads, and that dictates the BTU, your coils, and then you look at the CFM per room, which determines your duct size, and the distance is why you have the reheat coils and all. And we're almost saying, I need $1,000, but I can afford 100, so I'm going to go gamble at the casino with my 100, hoping I get 1,000, because the 25% is just the opinion of an engineer, and not, the engineer that reviewed your proposal. He said, I would suspect it would be 25%, and that's not scientific. We're gambling that it would be 25. What if it's 10? The whole project. When we first looked at the building, and we were told we're using square foot costs to figure our energy and our utilities. I said, you can't, because like you said, you've got 600 ton of cooling. It was designed for 160,000 square feet down to 62. We can't get to where we need to be with trying to modify what's there. And for the short term, the steering committee recommendation was to sell the building. The ideal is with an interested hospital client to bring jobs to town is to leave it as a hospital function and let them deal with the modification as they need. I know we've got the $500,000 from Mercy, but it is money that we could spend and offset the $300,000 or $400,000 for the temporary apparatus bay, or use it to build bunkhouse or what. you know, you've done an excellent job explaining what needs to be done. But I think it's a gamble. We gambled from recommendations on what we thought it would be, what we were told it would be, how much we had saved previously. And, you know, I just don't have confidence that we would be there, and for the short-term duration of us occupying the building, that we can justify the expense. But, you know, you've summarized potentials really well. You've talked about the areas that are problems, but I can't gamble. You know, I've only been at a casino once, and I lost $4, and it wasn't I didn't even touch a machine. Yeah, my wife borrowed the $4 from me. She was a smart one. But, you know, as far as proceeding, I just can't see that we would be gaining to get a payback, and we would be affecting the marketability for a hospital entity if that's considered or has expressed interest.
Yeah, I agree with what Leonard said. You know, if we didn't have any other options, and that was, you know, that was where we were going to be, it would make sense to go in and look at that and try to reduce cost. You know, you look at last year, the cost between the operating cost, utilities, I think gas and electric was $270,000. So you start doing the math on that. You know, $270,000 a year, 10 years, $2.7 million, costs remain constant. You start adding the years that you would be in that building. And if you were, you would have to really make some huge changes in that to generate some cost savings to be able to justify being in a building that size, 6,000 to 8,000 square feet. Even when the steering committee was put together, they were looking at a facility of, I believe, 31 or 32,000 square feet at the most. So you're looking at heating and cooling, a lot bigger space. It's not configured for anything other than a hospital. And to really make it more functional, you know, one of their proposals was spending another $4+ million on top of that to make it a more functional office building. But the end result, it was built at a hospital. You would never build that design for an office space. It's like, you know, you got an apple and an orange, and no matter how you try to make the apple look like an orange, it's still an apple.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care how much modification you try to make to it. So, you know, it's just a long range cost. And with the steering committee already making a recommendation, I like the presentation, but I just don't think we're going to be around long enough to get any benefit of this, and it'll be whoever takes over the building next.
Very good. I would say just finally in the two phases, the first phase had most of the potential, the gamble for the energy savings. The second phase of it was mostly for comfort control. So that was being able to put the air where you really needed it. So that if you were to consider things, whether it's a piece or any of it, us as stewards of the environment and the natural resources that we have. I spent 3 days with 6th graders talking about solar energy and wind power, and so that's one thing I'm passionate about is saving our natural resources, and so there's some components in that of phase one that have some very viable, good, strong energy savings. I don't know that if it was my building, I would do the phase two, but that may be for the next owner. But I might urge you to look at components of that phase one And there's some good things there that could help us all be good stewards. Your money, the community's money, and our planet anyhow. So,
Sure.
yeah, you betcha. So, thank you. I appreciate it.
Steve, thank you very much.
Any further questions, Louis?
No, I don't have any.
I just can't see going forward any farther on it. I don't have any other questions, so if there's no other comment, I'll bring it to a motion.
We're going to make a motion, just to make a motion for this, right?
Right,
Okay,
whether to proceed or not.
okay. I move to approve a contract in the amount of $163,000.
Wait,
No, this is not what I'm to proceed
one
with.
more.
Right here.
Okay, you can make your motion.
Okay. I move to approve a contract in the amount of $163,457 with Building Controls and Services Incorporated to perform Phase 1 HVAC and electrical upgrades to Building D as per the proposal of November 9th, 2017.
Okay, we have a motion.
A motion. All in favor?
No, we just have a motion.
You just have a motion, okay?
I'm not going to second it, so it dies
Okay.
for no second. Next item on the agenda is consider a scope of work for architectural services with Trainer HL to seal the envelope of the 1910 City Hall building.
1916.
Vance, Andy?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioner. It's pleased to be back here in front of you to hopefully move this project forward a little bit. Really, I'm just going to introduce Vance Kelly, who's the principal with our Historic Preservation Group that would be the lead on this, and then be here to answer any of your questions moving forward.
Okay. Well, we reviewed your proposal, and I appreciate the time to visit with you last week. Some of the things in the proposal, you've referenced mothballing the building, and our intention is not to mothball, but this is the first phase in actually the renovation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're looking at a new roof, not just patching, and the windows would be part of the finish, not just sealing up temporary, but I think the scope of work would be, as in the steering committee's recommendation, look at at the end of the project, we want to be able to get any historic tax credit. Yes. So throughout this exterior work, we would want to be conscious of that end result. Kind of highlighting roof windows, tuck pointing, basement waterproofing. We talked about that, but looking at your proposal, I wasn't for sure how much that was covered in your costs that you gave us.
So we included time in order to do some investigation, to working with the city to excavate down beside the exterior of the building to see what kind of condition the current waterproofing is. So that would give us the condition on the outside. We're also spending time on the inside to see if we can look if the water infiltration is occurring in specific places. And of course, once we identify that on the interior, that's where we would suggest that we look at the any exterior excavation. What we don't know is what kind of condition that waterproofing's in. And now we need to know that because that will tell us whether we have just repair work in certain areas or whether we're going to have to propose something a little more extensive than that.
I think it was installed late 80s, 90, 91.
Right.
With your proposal breakdown, are you it's kind of a conglomeration of all of them into one project, but your detailed assessment and conceptual design, would you say that's your typical preliminary design phase?
It is, yes. It's both going to the site, making sure that we understand the condition of the materials we're dealing with, but it gives us an opportunity to also make sure that we understand the design of the building so that as we, for example, look at a new roof, how are we going to do the new flashing depending on the roofing system that we choose. But it gives us an opportunity to do that pre-design work while we're there looking at the condition of the materials.
What we didn't discuss, but sometimes when you're looking at these elements, when you bid the roofing contract separate and you bid the windows separate and the tuck pointing and not go through a general contractor, you save some money that the general is just going to sub those components out to like Mid-Continent Restoration or somebody like that, and sometimes we can get a little better price. Are we locked in with your proposal that it would have to be bid as one?
So anytime I try to put together a proposal, fixed fee proposal for a client, I try to evaluate, look at the time, task, labor analysis, how long will it take us to do the work, how many meetings will we have, what effort do we need to assist with bidding. And we did make the assumption that this project, because it had multiple different components, would be bid to a general contractor rather than breaking it apart. So the fee that you see there for bidding and contract administration, that does assume a single general contractor. It doesn't mean the project has to be handled that way, but we would then have to look at to what extent you're wanting to break it down and whether that would require more hours for us to do that.
Well, one thing on the contract administration, just 4 site visits, that seems light for, I guess you'd have to have everything going at once to really take advantage that you're going to have to see roofing, windows, tuck pointing.
Right. Yeah, that certainly was assumption. Again, it's an estimate, but it is a fixed fee proposal. So if it went to a general contractor and he was looking at an 8-month project, I would be recommending to you that we come down, include additional trips in order to come down at the appropriate time. The building isn't that large of a building, and depending on what kind of condition we find, either with terracotta, the masonry, roof we know is going to be replaced, windows, the discussion that we have, would also be replaced. So there are a number of things that could be happening at the same time. The masonry, because I haven't been there and I haven't looked at the terracotta, that would be the only one that worries me a little bit about lengthening the construction time period.
Yeah, okay, we talked about until you determine the extent of deterioration of the masonry, whether it can be point or area tuck pointed, or if it's 100% tuck pointing.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we had mentioned before, is that in order to for us to really understand the scope and recommend the scope, we need to be out in the field. We need to be able to actually determine the condition of the materials that we're talking about that are identified. Allow us to do some cost estimating, because there always are different options for repair or replacement. And once that scope is set, we certainly know more. And then we would know whether you're looking at bidding it to a general contractor, or if there's a belief that we could separate it and involve separate contractors. So there is an opportunity, if you'd like, to allow us to do a phase at a time, step through our work, and once we know more, then we could look at revisions to the contract, or a continuation of, we want to stop here, or we want to look at it differently than what we've written. So you have that opportunity.
I can see it with the general contractor, of course. You're dealing with one individual, and he deals with the headaches of the 3 or 4 others. Mm-hmm. When you eliminate the general now, the project architect's dealing with the headaches of 3 or 4.
You've been there.
Numerous times.
Yes.
Yeah, what Murphy's Law, no good deed goes unpunished.
There you go.
Numerous times.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
What's your time schedule if we accept your proposal? What's your time schedule? I know we've waited a long time to get to this point. I think we are wanting to move forward. Mm-hmm. This is first phase, not mothballing.
Right.
We mentioned on the telephone about possible separate contract doing demolition to prepare the site for renovation inside.
Correct.
So what's your schedule that once the word is said, yeah, okay, we're going to sign it, mm-hmm. for you to start work, and then to you to complete the documents?
So we have staff available mid-June, so not the month of May, but in June we would be able to start. We mentioned that in order for us to do the field time and do the report of the assessment, we're talking about 4 weeks or another month, and that then gives us a clear direction of what we believe needs to be done. We would then come back to the City Commission with that report, with those cost estimates, and allow you to tell us whether we should move forward with the scope recommended or an alternative scope. So within 6 weeks, we'll be able to have that report and the recommendation presented to you. And then once that's approved, we're talking about 6 weeks in order to complete construction documents for bidding purposes. But you will have that opportunity after we complete Phase A, the assessment and conceptual design, to determine what scope you're wanting us to proceed with.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So from that mid-June start, you're looking, if I added right in my head, 16 weeks?
So 4 weeks to do field work and assessment, mm-hmm. and then
Okay.
we'd come back, and
Mm-hmm.
so we may lose a week or two depending
Okay.
on when that report is done.
Okay.
And then we would need 6 weeks to complete construction documents
Okay.
after the approval.
Could be 12, okay.
And then after the commission approves those documents, then you'd be ready to go out for bidding.
Okay.
Yes.
10 to 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to ask you, Leonard, as far as these, because you deal with this all the time. This is new for me, but I looked at the cost as the assessment, construction documents, and all that. $84,000. Does that seem in line with, as far as the scope of the project that they're undertaking? This is the total fee.
Yeah, I went back through some of our cost estimates and looked at what we had projected for window replacement, roof, basement waterproofing, exterior windows or restoration. And the only thing, where are we right now in your proposal, if the waterproofing is just has failure at locations, we're covered. Okay, now, if you have to specify that the building is excavated and re-waterproofed, is that covered too?
Within our proposed construction document fee, it is covered. So,
Okay.
so we can handle both spot repair or the entire perimeter, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, you know, each of us, depending on the size of your operation, our costs are different.
Yeah.
But, you know, it looks for the work with specifications, documentation, you know, it's reasonable.
And on here, on your schedule, you indicate that construction would likely take 3 to 6 months, depending on availability.
Yes.
Of materials, and of course, the extent of repairs would determine whether that would be 3 or closer to 6.
That's correct, yes.
Sure. Okay. And then any changes that you'd come forward to us of any unidentified changes that you would happen to find in the process?
Correct, right. Anytime you're dealing with an old building, you know, you might run into something. The windows have been replaced in the past, so we know work has been done there without having the documents from the previous project. We'll do a little bit of selective investigation to see what they left, whether they left the frame or how the new windows were installed. But we're not going to disassemble everything within the building to find out what's there within every window opening. So there's a chance you might find something.
And the tax credits are still, I know when Andy made his presentation, we worked with him on the steering committee, he estimated tax credits in the vicinity of around $900,000. That still
So
is close?
Yeah, tax credits are certainly still available. The state tax credits are, so they're available. As long as you're exceeding $5,000 per project, you're able to claim those credits. Those credits certainly are based on the allowable expenses. And so it depends on the actual estimate that we come back to you with,
Okay.
with the cost estimate, and that will help define those tax credit dollars.
Commissioner, when we looked at the original, we were anticipating the entire renovation of the project, and so we deducted what we thought the non-allowable expenses would be.
Okay.
So we would have to look at what the overall expenses of this specific project are and be able to give you an estimate on what those tax credits would be.
Okay.
Correct.
Can the tax credits be applied all at one time, that at the end of the project, you apply to all of them? Or is it just,
So
I noticed in your proposal, you excluded any fee for dealing with historic tax credits.
We certainly will deal with the State Historic Preservation Office to make sure that the work that's being proposed complies with Secretary of Interior standards, which are the same standards that you need for the tax credits. If you need assistance with preparing the Part 2 and the Part 3, we certainly can do that, but I did exclude it because my understanding was you've gone through this before and you may have staff that are familiar with it. We certainly, you use our documents as part of that documentation. You can do this project by itself and go ahead and do the paperwork and claim those credits, and you'll be given then through the Kansas Department of Revenue your certificate. You don't have to sell those at that time. And then if you do the next phase, which includes the interior restoration or rehabilitation, you can go through that project, claim the credits at the appropriate time, and then you'll have both certificates that you can sell at the same time. What we've seen within the market is the more tax credit value that you have, it can lead actually to a higher return. Instead of 80 cents on the dollar, you may receive 85, 87. So it does make a difference.
Okay.
And we discussed doing the interior demolition. Looking at the phasing of the work, I know there's some mobilization issues you have with too many on the site at one time, trying to do too much window interior demolition, what kind of conflict or potential problem do you see if the windows are installed now and interior demolition done later?
We would certainly, I think there would not be a conflict if you were to include the interior demolition in this phase. In fact, it may be recommended that you do that interior selective demolition now as part of a package that has a completed scope. So, for example, if you were to go to the State Historic Preservation Office and say, I want to do selective demolition and do a tax credit project, they look at it differently in that you're not finishing anything, you're cleaning it out. By tying it into a project where you're actually doing the exterior, the review process, I believe, would be an easier review process and allow you to claim those credits at the appropriate time. And I don't see a conflict with the interior work, with the window replacement. Yes, the contractor is going to be inside and outside of each of the windows. If you do have a general contractor involved, they can stage the project so that work is happening sequentially around and inside the building to avoid the conflict.
Yeah, kind of avoid a, whoops, there goes a window.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and it puts a potential for a change order into this phase, and it removes it from the renovation phase, which can be beneficial to hold the costs down in that phase. It's easy to tear out.
Yes. Yes, sir. When you have a building, an older building that certainly has changed over time, been remodeled, when you have a lot of building components that are covered over, suspended ceiling systems, wall furring, if you can remove that at an early phase, it allows the design team to have a better understanding of the building. It then reduces the risk to a general contractor who's bidding that rehabilitation work because he can see it rather than it being covered over. So there's a lot of advantages to actually cleaning out the building of all that non-historic material, not only from the standpoint of what I just mentioned, but also when you have a building that's not used, not occupied. By removing carpeting, suspended ceiling systems, we're removing materials that can absorb moisture and potentially grow mold as well. So it cleans out the building and helps from that standpoint too.
Okay. And you didn't give us a number for doing adding the demolition to this contract, did you?
I sent it, but I sent it Monday because I wanted to talk to the mechanical electrical engineer on making sure that we had some time for him to help us as we tried to look at how far back we can remove the electrical work that's in there. So it was sent on Monday, not at the same time this proposal was sent.
Okay. So do we have that? Do we have that proposal?
I don't remember getting it, but I'll check my files. I don't have them here, but
Yeah.
I know you talked about sending it and everything. But
Yeah, it was sent Monday 4 something in the afternoon. Yes.
Okay. Well, I would just hate to give you a partial or a contract here and then give you the opportunity to, not that you would do it now.
No, and I do have a copy, Mr. Whitehead, if you'd like me to give that to
I'll
you.
check my email here so
Yeah.
on Monday. I'll see what it is.
Andy, as far as you're concerned, when you finished up with the steering committee, as far as the special handling would be the asbestos that's in the 1916 building, but as far as that area that was tainted with mold, you considered that just to be part of general construction?
Yes, the report that was provided as part of that study indicated the levels were not yet at a point that raised to the KDHE levels.
Right. Okay.
So we'll need to notify them of the specifics within the building, but then they can handle that within their crews.
Will that involve you making another test, or no? You'll just show the results that you have on file?
I'll be careful how yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I can determine unless I'm in the building of whether there's been
Again.
additional change.
Right.
I think if the contractor raises questions, then we can review that, but I don't anticipate there's going to be a significant change from what we saw before.
Okay. Thank you.
I found the file. It was emailed on Monday, and I put it in a file. I didn't think it would be on the agenda for approval tonight.
Well, we can, if you'll stand by that, we'll consider it, and we can, if we take action on this, we can do an amendment to cover that.
Absolutely.
Do you have any further questions for Vance or Andy?
No, it just sounds like the sooner we can start the demo part, that gives us a step ahead of the general contractor when they come in, because a lot of that unnecessary part of the building has already been removed, and they can see what's left that
Yes,
they're
sir.
dealing with. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that maybe gives us a way to where we can come up with some type of plan to start working on that and move ahead.
Yeah, the restoration or renovation work will go a lot quicker,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it cuts down the unknowns quite a bit. You know exactly where you're working from. It helps you prepare the documents because you're not speculating.
Does this mean I have to put on a mask and gloves and a hard hat again?
Yeah.
I did for 37 and a half years. I've still got them.
Yeah. Just if you're robbing.
In that building, shortly after we moved, was winterized. Of course, the steam systems, all boilers, all those were
Yeah.
shut down. The water systems and saw those leaking pipes and stuff were drained. We ran dehumidifiers for a very long time before the testing was done. So, you know, that, I don't know if you're aware of that, but all of that was done as well after we left the building. So the conditions should have been better than when the people were in there and all the humidity from the steam system and the pipes leaking and stuff was going on. So hopefully it is a better environment in there now.
Okay.
I have one other question, and if you can refresh my memory, because I don't remember right off the bat. The renovation of the 1916 City Hall, you gave an estimated cost of what you thought the operating expenses were going to be? I don't have any idea. I've slept
testing
since
my
then.
memory. Yes.
Yeah, I know you did, but I was trying to determine.
Was that in your report?
I believe it was. I mean, whatever your prior expenses were within that building, you're going to have some variances, obviously. But you're going to have a much more energy efficient building at the end of the day.
Right.
So you'll have more systems, because you're going to have central air. Before you didn't really have that. So you're going to have more systems there, but you're going to have a much more energy efficient systems. You're not going to have the boiler that was there before. So they could be similar to what those costs were before. Now, if we look at the entire campus and look at the public safety side, then obviously that's going to be a little bit of a difference. But if you're just looking at that building, because you're going to go back with LED lighting, you're going to go back and insulate the roof and the exterior walls. So you may see a slight increase in those costs, but you're not going to see a significant difference from what you were prior spending on those. Now, it may be different depending if we go electric gas on some of those systems, but I wouldn't see a significant impact.
Okay.
And now you're really testing my memory on that. so.
Okay. I can go back and look. I've kept
I think
everything.
it's on the website,
Okay.
Lewis. I think we have that report posted.
Okay. I kept all the
I
documents.
can try to find the link
so-
and send it to you.
Okay.
Any further questions concerning the proposal?
No.
So at this time, you have no more questions. I have no questions. So entertain a motion.
I make a motion. I move to authorize an agreement to be prepared by the city attorney for architectural services with Trainer HL in the amount of $84,000 plus expenses to be funded from special use sales tax for buildings and facilities to seal the envelope of the 1916 City Hall building.
I'll second the motion. I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carried. We would like to stay on within the time frame of schedule, not that it drag on and on and on. Okay? Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Next,
I was going to say, we'll do something similar as before. Thank you, Commissioner.
Gentlemen, thank you.
next item on the agenda, consider a request from First United Methodist Church to add a street light in the middle of the 200 block of South 6th Street on the west side.
This was a request from the First United Methodist Church. They have a committee that reviews safety and security in the area. They recommended this light. There is increased traffic in that area with all the churches that are located there. And we reviewed our street lighting policy, and we felt due to the increased traffic and pedestrian activity that it was warranted. And so staff recommends approval.
Any questions?
No, I'm kind of familiar with that area too. I've spent a lot of time in that alley. A lot of alleys. Wait, let me clarify that.
Yeah.
By nature of my work, I've
Yeah.
spent a lot of time in a lot of areas of the city,
Yeah.
so I'm well familiar with that. And that
Yeah.
looks like it's needed there in that particular area.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, so with no more questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay. I move to authorize adding a street light in the middle of the 200 block of South 6th Street on the west side.
Okay, I'll second the motion. And all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda, consider entering into a cooperative agreement for the US 75 Excess Management Plan. In our packet, we received information from the city attorney, correspondence clarifying the definition of change of use. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Wayne Goodmanson's here, and he had a big part in coming up with this change of use definition, and I know Wayne's worked hard on it. I can just say that some previous commissions were sympathetic to some business owners' plights. I mean, let's face it, our Highway 75 goes right through our city, and there are a lot of driveways and curb cuts, and those are issues, and shared driveways, and people have businesses, and you know, sometimes they close and they reopen under a different name, and the process to get the approvals, and these are all issues that were discussed.
Okay.
Have the business owners that had the concerns last time, have they had a chance to get back with you on this revised? Have you had any feedback from
I sent a
them?
letter to Nelda Buckley in Topeka and copied Wayne, and they got back to me in mid-February.
Okay.
I sent that, John Veets, local attorney, represented, I mean, I can read you the names, but it's all business owners on the corridor, Highway 75 corridor.
Okay.
Car dealerships and some restaurants. And they had some input in 2017. I think that's when the meetings were held. And I sent that to Nelda, and it kind of simmered. And but anyway, the most recent definition has been sent to them, Mr. Veets and Mr. Goad. He was here as the bank had loaned money on some of the businesses were involved. And you know, I think everybody thinks this is about as good as we can get. We need to move forward. The city, as far as I know, hasn't lost any opportunities, and we don't want to lose any opportunities for funding. So that's kind of where we're at. I'll turn it over to Wayne.
I'm just basically here as a sounding board if you have any questions. I just want to emphasize, I'm not here, and this plan's not here to stifle economic growth. That's not our plan whatsoever, and that's not what our consultant worked with us and the city granddads at that time to try to get done. And what you're here to decide upon tonight is a cooperation agreement, you know, and it spells out specifically preserve efficient operations along the corridor, protect the functionality of the highway into the future, provide opportunities for economic development along the corridor. So again, I just want to emphasize, this wasn't made to stifle economic development in here. And as Jeff mentioned, we did get the wheel rolling on the definition of change of use and this type of thing. And Nelda took some ideas that I had. The only problem is you have to incorporate those with 5 other district engineers within the state. One is in the Kansas City area, which is heavily metropolitan, and the other one is within he's out of Hutch, but he's got the Wichita area, which is heavily metropolitan. So some of my ideas did not go over well with those, and so this was just an agreement that she worked up, and I thought it was a very good job that she had done on this.
Because the modifications are not just to our cooperative agreement, it's unilateral across the state.
Correct. What these changes were made to our policy,
Right.
not to your cooperation agreement. Correct.
So can explain the length of time to get them
Correct.
ironed out.
Yeah, you get 6 different people plus everybody else involved in it, and it just took a lot of time.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's kind of like everything's going now. It's kind of the metropolitan area against the rural areas, and that's just kind of a thing back and forth.
In the agreement, it talks about every 2 years considering or looking at is that initiated by the state, or is that initiated by the communities to say, hey, let's look over our management plan, or is it just there in case
I think it's
needed?
just, I've not experienced this before. I think it's just there in case we find an issue on your end or on my end after 2 years. Maybe we need to get together and hash this out.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a definite you have to do it on a 2-year cycle.
okay.
The only other agreement I have on an access management plan, and that's with the city of Parsons. As of now, nothing has come before me that we've had to get together and redo it. It does, and I'm not pushing this just for my own well-being, but it does open up another opportunity or another window for funds that
Right.
that the city can latch on to. This past year, Parsons had a couple projects. They weren't selected for the City Connecting Link Improvement Program. So instead they went out, they've got an access management plan. So they went out to NELDA or to the access management group, and they solicited funds there, and they were given money then to work on an intersection there in Parsons. So it does provide opportunity or additional revenue stream that might be able to generate for some of the work on the corridor stuff.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you're gonna automatically get it, but
Yeah.
it's something you can apply for.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I got from Mr. Viets and Mr. Goad, and I was concerned about it myself, and that's on change of uses. And in my mind, it ought to be incorporated somehow with trips, because that's people going in and out. And in the definition that Nelda we finally came up with, if it's not spelled out in the Institute for Transportation Engineers definitions for changes of uses, she put in some language in there that talks about percentage of trips or number of trips generated, whether a change of use is required or not. So I thought that was a good move on her part.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any further questions?
No, I don't.
Thank you. And also thank you for your help in the economic development grant for Peter Pan Road.
You're very welcome, because as soon as you guys get going on that, I can go get both my hairs cut and not catch flack about that job. So I'll be glad. But no, it's a great project.
We really appreciate that. All the KDOT has really been good to Independence, so thank you.
Thanks a lot. If you got any questions, just give me a holler.
Sure. Thanks,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
So with no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign the cooperation agreement for the US 75 Access Management Plan.
Okay, I have a motion. I'll second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is considering designating the following streets as truck routes. 10th Street from South City limits to Sycamore Street, Sycamore Street from Pennsylvania Avenue to 21st Street, 13th Street from Main Street to Railroad Street, Railroad Street between 15th and 11th Street, 15th and 11th Street between Railroad and Sycamore Streets. Chief Harrison, would you like to enlighten any more?
Yes, we also have the change the parking there on the 700 block of North 13th as a no parking zone from 9 to 5. And erect proper signage for that, and then designate the 800 block of North 13th as a no truck parking zone with proper signage. On the no truck parking zone, that was actually a request from Beechner to keep the trucks from parking in that area because he provides adequate space for them to park. And he also, in the process of this was kind of a collaboration between it was Mr. Feenan and the Traffic Safety Committee. We wanted to make sure that, one of his main concerns was that we don't hurt business. And so, of course, our emphasis is not, we're not trying to find a way to write more citations. We're trying to find a way to make that area safer for everybody and to improve the flow of traffic in that area. He's spent a lot of money upgrading his equipment so trucks move through a lot quicker, we're told. Curious enough, if you look at that through all the materials there, I sent a memo to the city manager regarding this. There's been one change. In the memo it says I received one phone call and one email. I've actually received either 4 or 5 contacts now. And believe it or not, every one of them is very enthused with the proposal that we brought forward, which I didn't expect that to happen. There was 20 residences that are impacted in that area. We gave them over a week to respond. So I was impressed with everyone's response there. And I think it's also important to note that according to city ordinance, any streets that are 26 feet in width or less, I believe the commission can make those, designate them as a narrow street and limit parking on one side of that street. Well, this street, I didn't actually go out and measure it physically, but according to pictometry, I zoomed in on it and it says it's 27 feet in width. So I think we're right there, and I drove down through it as well, and everyone that called or emailed commented that you can't get down the street because people are parked on both sides, and I had driven down the street last week and I did have to stop and let traffic through. And every person that commented also commented that they don't like that parking on the east side of the street where those duplexes are, because there's a lot of young children that play in that area, and they're just, a ball will come out or whatever, just the stereotypical thing, and they're scared to death some kid's going to squirt out from between those cars and they won't be able to stop in time. So anyways, is there anything else you'd like for me to address on the proposal or any questions?
It's the 13th Street. Are you going to have to modify any stop signs
No.
to provide better access, or is it pretty much set up as a throughfare?
Everyone
north to
that,
south?
everyone that was the citizens and the traffic safety stakeholders and Mr. Feenan there at Beechner and the residents, no one has suggested any change to traffic controls as far as stop signs. There's been some concerns mentioned by one person over a speed limit and another person over making it a one-way, but those things aren't really supported as a group, it doesn't sound like, from anybody involved in the process. There was quite a few people involved in the process. And again, this proposal, this comes from our citizens. It's not the police department. That I think it's a fantastic proposal, and we would have, after visiting with Feenan, this is how we would have written it up, I'm sure. But this is what the Traffic Safety Committee came up with, and Mr. Feenan met with the Traffic Safety Committee and came to this. And his, like I said, his only request to me was, are you going to go out and write tickets? Or are you going to slow down truck traffic through here? And I said, we're not here to shut your business down. We want you. It's in our best interest for him to be successful, his company to be successful. So,
And it isn't your primary concern that you're trying to centralize or localize heavy truck traffic to certain streets to avoid lighter streets or other street damage? Wasn't that one of your primary goals, I thought it noted?
well, that's always a goal. If you can limit that traffic to a location, you control where you are going to have to invest in the streets. As it is, they can do whatever they want right now. But more importantly to me, I don't build streets. Of course, I'm concerned with the street building budget, but that's outside of my scope. What my training experience is in traffic safety. So I come at it from a safety standpoint, and we limit that flow of traffic by channelizing it into routes. And that route is set up for a specific reason after consulting with Mr. Feenan about how the traffic comes in to that area. It has to go across the scales. Then it either loads or unloads and then comes back around and goes across the scales again and then goes out a different direction. So that's the illustration that Officer Townley created to demonstrate that, the flow of the truck traffic if they come in empty, they go across the scales empty, they load, and then they go back across the scales to get weighed with the load. If they come in full, they go across the scales, then they drop, then they go across the scales again to see how much they need to be compensated for dropping off. So,
Sounds like a good plan to me.
Okay. No other questions, and I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we designate the following streets as truck routes. 10th Street from South City limits to Sycamore Street, Sycamore Street from Pennsylvania Avenue to 21st Street, 13th Street from Main Street to Railroad Street, Railroad Street between 15th and 11th Streets, 15th and 11th Streets between Railroad and Sycamore Streets. Also, I move we designate the 700 block of North 13th as a no parking zone on the east side of the street and designate the 800 block of North 13 as a no truck parking zone with the proper signage.
Okay, I second the motion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Jody, thank you. Thank you in the committee and Mr. Feenan for all working together to make this happen.
well, you're welcome. We appreciate getting to smooth things out around town.
And Mr. Townley, too.
Next item on the agenda, consider approving a memorandum of understanding, MOU, with the Kansas East Region Department of Children and Families, DCF, and the City of Independence for use of space in Building D.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. My name is Joel Morrison. I'm the Assistant Regional Director of Operations for DCF for the East Region. I have Dan Klukas, our Deputy Secretary of Operations, here as well. This evening, we're here to speak to you about entering into an MOU with the city for space at Building D. Our current office is located at the ARCO building. In the past 3 years, we've had to enter into our continuity of operations plan 6 times over those 3 years. With the recent fires and our other issues with the building, we feel that it is an opportunity in which we need to address where we are serving the community from. Currently, we do have an active COOP. We are currently located in Parsons and are servicing the community from Parsons. And that we have serviced the community from different locations, but that is our current location that we are working from. DCF services Montgomery, Chitopa, and Wilson counties. That equates to roughly about 300 families that we service in those areas. What this MOU will do is this will allow us to keep all of our staff, all 30 staff, in one location here. If we have used the this building here, the Memorial Building, as a base of operations due to scheduling and other activities, we're unable to house all 30 staff here. Building D does allow us to do that as well and provide security for our staff that are there. We've looked at several different locations in the city with through different venues, from the professional building to other locations. Those do not service our needs. We are at this point, if this is not an opportunity, we would have to look elsewhere to still service those 3 counties as well. We have worked with the city attorney to draft this MOU, and with that said, we have had to it is a consistent issue or issue with having a place to go in the event of a COOP activation, and so this would provide us that security at that point. I will stand for any questions that you may have at this time.
So this is for emergency use?
That is
only.
correct, yes. And we have, in several other cities, we have these agreements with different locations. The reason that we try to address these with cities is, of course, consistency of availability as well.
Right. The statement about the rent is negotiated, so I guess, say there's an emergency situation come up, you're going to project how long, and then you would negotiate at that time?
Yes. We always, if it's only a week or so that we're out, we would continue to use Parsons or some location like that, because it is a short period of time. But if it was to be longer, we've had a couple of different opportunities in which we had to activate our COOP, and it was longer than just a week at that time. So we would negotiate that rate at that point.
Okay, so if there's an emergency and it's going to be a few days, less than a week, you'll automatically go to Parsons?
Correct.
Okay. For an extended period, then, is your rent established by your state policy per day or per week?
No, the rent will be established through the MOU. We have that was sent to us today from the attorney, so we have a set rate that we would use.
And the rate is really based on what our budget is, our budget is for our Independence office. Even if we're not in the ARCO building, there's still some costs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the rate that we were talking about was $8.58 per square foot for a year, and then that would be prorated for how long we're in the hospital. Or
Okay.
Building D, I guess is what you're calling it.
Okay.
But our intent is not to, of course, we'd like to stay in our building.
Sure.
The landlord spent quite a bit of money, but there are some issues with the fires, and some things have to be taken care of that we can't really go into right now,
Sure.
nor do we need to. But in a case where we're going to be out, I don't remember, we were in Memorial Hall just up on the second floor, and we really appreciate you guys letting us use that space, but it's really not conducive to the type of work we do.
Right.
We do a lot of work with a lot of people that have needs,
Right.
and they don't need to sit across the table from someone else that has needs and talk about, while we're interviewing them to see if they qualify for aid. So it's nicer to have a private location where we can talk to them. Our intent is we don't like to leave the city of Independence. Like Joel said, there's basically 3 counties and over 300 families that we serve per month from Independence. When I was here Tuesday to kind of assess what happened with the fires and what we're going to do at the building, I believe I saw in just a little brief time I was in the lobby, probably about 5 or 6 people that we turned away that were coming to talk to someone in DCF. Now we have to tell them this week that they're, call this number or go to Parsons. It was much easier the last time when we just put a sign on there say go to Memorial Hall. So If we would be able to use Building D, that would be, it just would work better for us. We went, right now, some of our social workers, since they work in this 3-county area, and we already have social workers in Parson, we let them work from home, and that's not as safe as we
Right.
want it to be.
Right. I guess you've been here through the meeting and heard the discussion earlier about Building D.
Yes.
So in the case we established this agreement with the state of Kansas, is this potentially ongoing that a new owner could negotiate or
Yeah,
could establish?
we would be open to that as well.
Or it just goes away.
Yeah,
I mean,
either way.
Either way.
Yeah, either way. We're just looking for assistance. It would be nice to be able to stay in our facility. It doesn't happen really in, it's not just Independence, our Independence facility. We go into the continuity of operation planning, which is basically emergency management for a couple days in other offices due to pipes breaking and air conditioning go down, so.
Yeah, DCF, did it used to be under SRS?
We used to be SRS, they just changed the name.
Split KDADs out? and-
Well, what we did, sir, was we had a disability behavioral health services
Yeah.
was part of us, so the state hospitals were in SRS.
Right.
So they left, and then we changed our name.
Yeah,
So
okay.
they went to KDADs.
Yeah, I've
and we-
worked for SRS on consultant basis on some projects. I remembered the split, I wasn't for sure.
We still
Which-
have those KDADs employees that worked with, when they worked for us, they're still in our offices.
Yeah,
I
we
believe
still
have
house
one here in
one here.
Independence.
So you're kind of anticipating maybe to be able to,
We think that it's prudent based on, recent events and other events that have happened, that we have a plan. And we're doing this in all of our locations. It's not just Independence. We just felt that we had the opportunity at this point to address it with the recent fires as well.
and this requires no modification to the facility by the city, so we're
No,
just,
no.
just a lease.
It's just simply the
Space.
space availability, yes,
Okay.
sir.
You have any
No,
questions?
I think you've covered pretty much everything on the topic.
Okay.
I wrote a few notes down, but yeah, I'm good.
Well, if there's no further questions, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the memorandum of understanding with the East Region of the Kansas Department of Children and Families.
Okay, we have a motion. I'll second the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. Now, Gilmore.
We're there. Want us to wait or go on? No. Okay. Next item, consider proposal from Jared Gilmore and Phillips, PA, to prepare the 2017 audit.
Sorry this was brought on late, but it's something we've been waiting for, and we feel we need to get it in place as soon as possible, which is a contract with an auditing firm to do the 2017 audit. As you know, our previous auditor terminated the agreement, and so we were moving fast as we could to find an auditor. As you know, finding an auditor at this time of the year is, they have their work usually booked up, and so, but based on excellent references that we got regarding this firm, and they do most of the cities around here, if not all of them, Cherryville, Caney, Coffeyville, and I talked to the city managers there and got excellent reviews. So we asked them for a proposal and just got that today, and so we wanted to get that on board so we could get going. The only thing I'd point out is that it was a very good fee. If you notice, the fee was actually considerably less than what we would have been paying with the old firm. So we recommend adopting this agreement, going with this agreement with them.
I looked through their proposal. Was there any, I didn't notice a part of doing a public presentation. Is that going to be an issue with them?
Yeah, I didn't see it there. I was
Ask
looking,
him that.
I was looking
Yeah.
through there, and I was looking for that as well.
Yeah, I visited with Neil Phillips on several occasions. They've been swamped doing audits. They're licensed in 4 states. Matter of fact, they've been down in Texas for the last 2 weeks, but they basically cover everything around here. Yerke's recommended them as one piece of it. I know Craig has talked with the other city managers and felt good with it. Montgomery County uses them, and I talked to Charlotte last week, and she spoke very highly of them. So Neil and I have had some back and forth conversations. I asked him just to go ahead and get this proposal to us. They are interested in bidding it out long term, but I said, let's start with this piece first to get this going, and then we can address the rest of it. I'll absolutely ask them about the presentation.
Yeah, we would like to have that in there, that they do come to do a presentation. It also mentioned that no opinion on internal controls. Is that, did I read that right?
I think it, let me get that out. I don't think it was stating that they wouldn't give an opinion. I think that is just one of the scopes of what they have. It's just legal jargon that's kind of boilerplate with the auditing terms.
Yeah.
Is that information, it's not on this screen here?
No, it's contained in the contract.
Well, they do have a money tree growing there on the front.
Yeah, they do.
That's their logo. I pulled that off. Totally ripped it off.
Okay, it just says internal controls over compliance related to major programs and an opinion or disclaimer of an opinion. So that'll be part of their objective. They'll either provide an opinion or provide a disclaimer of opinion. So that's
Pretty much like the last auditing
Yeah.
firm did.
Yep,
They,
exactly.
will we also get a report, like the last auditing firm did? They gave us a report for the commissioners to look at.
You know, we didn't get into that, and I can certainly address it. I did take a look at the counties when I was up there talking with Charlotte. So I saw their actual audit. I didn't see any of the governance letters or the management letters that came with that, but I saw the context to what the audit was.
Yeah, I would like that, along with making sure that that they're in tune with giving a presentation of whatever the findings are, whatever they are. They don't have any qualms about coming up here and laying everything out.
No, absolutely, and we fully support that as well. I think it's important. Gives you all and us, everybody, an opportunity to discuss what they've found.
Sure.
Yeah, that was,
Jeff was just looking quickly through it again, and we found the language that talks about reports to the commission and presenting to the commission, so we think it's covered in there.
okay.
And as far as reporting,
Right.
coming before the
Right.
commissioners, making a report to the city. Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to approve it, subject to confirming that with them.
Hmm.
you can do
Yeah, yeah.
that. I don't think
I,
that Mike would know better.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have any issues with them
Yeah.
getting that
Yeah,
or the presentation.
with the time that it came and trying to scan it real quick, it wasn't clear, so that's a good point to clarify. But, yeah, any other questions?
No, if those two concerns, if they'll meet those two, then
Yeah.
that's, like I said, I would be happy with that. And the
So I
fact
could-
that it is cheaper.
I make a motion that we enter into an agreement with Jared Gilmore and Phillips, PA, to prepare the 2017 audit with verification of the public presentation and
Governance.
internal control comments from the review?
What comments?
Internal, their
Okay.
opinion of internal controls. Got it?
Yep. Got it.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is 2016 audit compliance status.
I'll have Mike give you, it's just a verbal report. Not a lot has changed since we give you the written one, but I might give you a couple of things.
Yeah, so one thing that I did discuss, was it last week or the week before, when we came with that, I have scheduled meetings with Encode to sit down and visit with them specifically about where we're at with our purchase order system within their system, what the availabilities are and how we can mesh those in there together to get us where we need to be. We'll also, during that meeting next week, also be talking about the reconciliation process and bringing that within the accounting system.
And have we looked into the setting up a purchasing policy?
So we've gathered up some information. There's there's information out there. We've been gathering them up from the cities, and right now, Craig and I are parsing through those and pulling out the pieces that we feel are pertinent to what we want and what we want to see in there and represented in the independent city policy. So we're putting that together. It's not finished yet, though.
How broad are the purchasing policies that you're looking at? Is it just
Some of it.
within staff, or is it city policy wide?
All right,
There
clarify
can
that.
be purchasing policy for a department, or there can be a purchasing policy for the city operation.
It would be all inclusive. It would
Yeah.
bring all that together.
Policies vary. For example, a city manager might have purchasing power up to $25,000. That's very typical. Up to $25,000 of budgeted items. Department heads may have $10,000, and that's how just for positions in purchasing as part of the purchasing policy. Some I've seen higher. I've seen city managers have $100,000. But most I've seen, and where I previously city was $25,000. Budgeted items that did not need to come back to the city commission or council.
Okay.
But that's the typical, you kind of have a tiered thing like that. And even, you could even go below department head. Sometimes below department director, it might be a supervisor has 5,000 or 1,000. Sometimes if they need to get something right away, they don't want to have to go through a process.
So it's a broad-based policy, not just limited scope.
Yeah, I mean, and you can get overall financial policies in 20 pages or 100 pages. You can get purchasing policies. So we looked at, purchasing policies I'm familiar with was about 10 pages.
Yeah.
I've seen them 30 pages.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And what we've gotten is a little bit of both of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not reinventing the wheel. I mean, we want to find a good policy. And also I have GFOA, Government Finance Officers Associations. They set out criteria, what you should have in different policies, this kind of thing. And so we'll kind of follow that criteria, make sure we got up to date.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that hits everything. The other piece of it was just the audit, getting this set up for the 2017 audit there.
Okay, next is the first quarter financial report.
Well, I'll go ahead and just start this off because I do know that there's some questions. And so I'll just make some clarifications both for the commission and for the public. as a result of the 2016 audit and the timing that we received that, there were adjustments that had to be made to the 2016 numbers that were directed from the auditors to make. Those changes impacted the ending balances that were involved in 2016, which then carried forward to 2017. Those numbers then had to be carried forward throughout the course of the year of 2017. I completed the fourth quarter treasurer's statement for 2017 prior to having that information. So the information that's contained in the 2018 first quarter statement reflects those changes, and it is different than what you had seen from the fourth quarter ending statement in 2017.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I struggle with this. I look at this. I went back and looked at, I have the quarterly reports that go back to the first quarter of 2017. My question is, what on the, see which one I'm looking at. Example, December 31st, 2017. That beginning balance, that is, what date is that actually starting at? Is that January?
What statement do you have?
This would be the December 31st, 2017.
So that would be...
What date does that actually start? Because the ending balance would be for the quarter ending December 31st.
Right. So on the quarterly statements, that covers a 3-month period of time.
Okay. So
that would have been the ending balance. The beginning balance on that fourth quarter statement would have been the ending balance from September.
Okay.
And the beginning balance of October.
Okay, so that would be October 1st to December 31st. And same with with the first quarter ending March 31st, that would be January 1st
through
2018
yes.
through 3/31.
Yes.
18.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to follow the numbers.
There's like $500,000 difference between ending balance and beginning balance, isn't there?
No,
balance
it
in
was
December was $845,713. Beginning balance of the first quarter, let me make sure I've got this right. The first quarter is $327,225.
So there were changes, and the journal entries and the adjustments that the auditors provided me and directed me to change based on all their findings in their audit. So there was money moved around from one fund. Maybe it was located in one fund and it should have been located in another fund, so that had to be done. So a lot of the balances in different funds changed and getting them put where the monies were supposed to be.
Well, that's like just in general fund was $500,000 difference.
And I'm sorry, I did fail to bring a fourth quarter one with me that was in the paper. So.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Would you repeat that again?
I failed to bring the fourth quarter one.
Oh.
With me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I meant to grab that and I didn't do so.
Okay.
So I mean,
are you talking about?
Well, I see what you're saying.
No.
Happened. It just that much money. It just brings up a lot of questions of where are we actually, because we don't have our 2017 audit done, and how many more places are we going to find problems that we know where we are? Because if the if it changed $500,000 in one quarter from 2016, what could it change at the end of 2017? Because we're still, that ripple hasn't leveled out yet. We're still getting the ripple from 16 into 17. Now we're 5 months into 18.
So a lot of that is going to come out through the 17 budget. And I think when the Yerkes made their presentation, they said that some of this was going to continue. But the numbers that they gave me with their information, their audit got us back to a correct number that they felt comfortable with. And a lot of it had to do with some of the journal entries. So redoing some of those journal entries through the end of the audit process that is done and correcting those balances, that's in essence what I've done here.
But they only corrected to the start of 2017, right?
Right.
So we'll still have issues for part of 2017, even with the internal controls and guidelines put in. We're still looking at issues with the 2017 audit, at least for part of the year, because we're still correcting journal entries in 2016.
Well, the 2016 ones are correct.
You got them all corrected,
Yeah,
okay?
everything as far as 16 is fixed, done exactly as I was directed by the auditors and all the information that was provided to me. It is done and it is closed out. So those numbers, when Craig and I visited with them at the time that they presented us with the audit, they directed me and said, you've got to go do these. There's changes that has to be made to be reflected in the ending balances to get your books corrected and where those numbers were. And those numbers are going to have to be carried forward into 17, because the numbers that were in 17 that started out the year, then worked out through the year, were based off of the old numbers in 2016 that were not accurate.
Commissioner, were you talking about how not just 2016, but into 2017, before I came, that there were still maybe being journal entries done as they were done in 2016? Is that what you're referring to?
Referring to, yes.
Yeah, and that they
Issues
did
with
raise
that.
that issue. The auditors did raise that issue.
It could happen.
That could happen. It's not saying there are, but
Right.
But they were concerned about that.
Yeah. And we may find some things that occurred in 17 now, because the auditors, they didn't look very much at 17.
Right.
Because they were auditing 16. We can find things potentially in 17 that are adjusted in a positive way that were reflective of 2016 that should have went the other direction, if that makes sense. Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but
It just seems like if you've made those potential journal entries, either lack of documentation or put in the wrong fund, transferred and still not corrected, put in the wrong fund, if you still continued with that process into part of 2017.
well, we're not doing that today.
No, right, but for the first part,
Right, and
that
we're going
was
to be
something that
reviewing
transpired.
that.
So
Is there a risk for it, Louis? Yeah, there is a risk.
sure, that doesn't seem to me like that's going to be, the latter half of the year is going to be an improvement, because we're handling that part of it different.
Yes.
But we still have warts on the first part of the 2017.
There's
and they
potential,
could
and
very
I-
well
They
show
could
up,
be, and
because
I don't
wanna
want to
give
say
people
that there
the
is.
impression that because we've set all these guidelines and implementations, that everything's going to come out squeaky clean. I'll be honest with you. Maybe I need to sit down and take a budget course. I'm just at a loss as to where we're at. Can't put it any more plainer than that. I'm not a budget guy.
And we certainly understand what you're saying on that.
If, a simple explanation to where even me could understand, and it might help the people out there in the audience that are here or going to watch this on tape. At least be blunt. Where the hell are we?
I think we're heading in the right direction. I feel comfortable here. Now, I think the 2017 audit is going to give us it's going to certainly shore these up and demonstrate that this is right, or it'll be the last piece of cleaning some of that up. I don't think that Yerkes would have put it out and said, we have no clue where you're at. And then that's not what they stated. They certainly could have given a much worse opinion. I'm not sure of which finding, but they found no evidence of issues of a going concern being a problem there. A going concern means that the viability and liquidity of a given entity is in jeopardy or in peril within the next 12 to 24 months, and they did not indicate that.
Well, in conversation, it did mention that there were past audits to where they made recommendations, and the city failed to implement recommendations, and we need to get on the right path. We need to restore confidence in the people out there that documents we're producing, what we're putting out there in the paper, that it's correct, and there's an explanation as to why these figures are changing. They're changing to a corrected journal entry, and it would be nice to see how that transpired. Here's where it was. Here's where it should have been. Here is where it's gone to, and it's correct. Sure. Because we're at the mercy of the financial team.
No, I understand that. And we were working with Yerkes still and helping walk through a lot of these things, making sure whatever I'm putting in place is truly addressing the problems from their eyes and both internally, where I know that this is going to make a difference. I've already communicated a lot of these things with Neil. I walked through our audit with him. He's familiar with what just has occurred. We talked about several things. So he's also given me some insight and will continue to do so now that we're going to go ahead and engage them of things that I need to be also looking at prior to them showing up, outside of just the normal stuff that we'd ordinarily give them. And I will note, I think I did put that in the note to you today. Fund 45. I'd cleaned up the titles, but apparently I'd overlooked that one. It's the special alcohol program fund.
And it had nothing to do with
no, it had nothing to do with commercial
bank
CDs.
and CDs. Okay, because I didn't see that. I didn't see that listed, and.
No, I had typed those all in as opposed to having formulas in there, and apparently I just passed over on that particular one, and I didn't catch it. It was in the fourth quarter one too.
Okay, can I have you take a look at that? Are you familiar with that? The reason it's handwritten in red ink is because when I went to print, it didn't print. The red. So I had a hand copy all the red amounts in that. So that there's a difference of 177,000 plus in that. So what's
and so that goes back to all the journal entries that occurred from 2016 and the corrections that had to be made there. Through the closing process of what I had to do with what the auditors provided me, I had to do 43 separate journal entries. Some of them were customary, some of them were corrections. And I would certainly be happy to share those with you, share them with the commission. Absolutely.
Okay. I would say that would probably be a good idea, because I'd like to see it.
Yeah, and that's fine. And, you know, it may be, we can do it however, but it may be just a good situation to come up, and I can kind of walk you through it, because there's 43 of these journal entries,
Sure.
and it's extensive.
Sure.
I mean, just doing those took me all day, one day, just doing those. So,
I would like to see that, and hopefully the other commissioners
Yeah,
will
no,
come on board, and I want to see the corrective changes that are made, so I can
Sure.
have a better understanding
absolutely.
of what that is. But you do recognize
Oh yeah,
this.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And maybe that'll give me a better understanding. Now, the other two may be a little more well-versed in city budgets, but I'm not. So I guess I'm saying, show me.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I think the audit showed some concerns, and then, we really don't know where's the reconciliation? Why are we still seeing things changing? There's a lot of citizens that are concerned from the audit, the length and the findings, and it takes too long to wait for the audits to get this straightened out. We're going to have to say, is there a faster way that we can get all these changed? Because I still, I understand how that's going to affect the balance, but like in that one fund of $500,000, that's a lot of money for one fund to be affected from the audit 2 years ago.
So,
for them.
I think as you and I talked earlier today, there's always audit journal entries that occur. They come in, and that has to do with a lot of the reconciling items, just bringing that back up, pairing it up. If there are significant changes or issues that arise, we have to adjust the balances per the direction, and this was the case. That's not always the case every single year. Those balances are where they're supposed to be, and they carry forward. So, again, what I can concentrate on is making sure we're heading in the right direction.
Well, we haven't hired a treasurer yet, have we? So there's no one double checking. You're the only one verifying
Right at
the
this
number.
moment, yes.
You have to do the treasurer. Why have we not hired a treasurer?
Well, we've been looking at some candidates, and we're actually going to restructure the position a little bit. So, but we still have a pool of 5 candidates right now, and they're setting up interviews right now. So it's going through this whole process with audit and everything. I think it's time we look at restructuring that position from what we originally thought. And so, but we do have a good pool, like I said, of candidates, and Mike, and he's got an interview panel. He'll be interviewing them. So we'll have that position on board. And I know you think it may be strange that the finance director can also be the treasurer, but it's not uncommon to see. I mean, that's sometimes a permanent position. You see a finance director is also the treasurer. Now, ideally, do you want somebody as a separate, or so forth, an accountant or something? That's what we'll have here as well. But we will get there.
Yeah, this is just a temporary situation.
But it's been a long temporary situation, and we're coming off of a really bad audit, and we're still seeing in our financial reports, we're only getting them quarterly. We used to get them monthly, and it just, how can you do the work of 2 people and be accurate in your work? You've got to have that extra person there that is doing input too, to
The
guarantee.
treasurer's side, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of it, because a lot of this was being done by the director of finance, city clerks, both previous ones to myself. So that piece of it hasn't really changed. It's just picking up a few of the additional duties that the treasurer's handled.
But then the learning curve that you were under too, I'm just thinking, I mean.
It was difficult, and
Oh, yeah.
I know when we had John Staten was very instrumental in
Yeah.
helping me identify some things. We went through things. Yerkes was fantastic in working with me and helping me understand some things from this piece of it, and also evaluating certain elements of this that we need to clean up and make the process better, provided that we can't get it pulled within the accounting software system. So yeah, that's another area. If we're going to have a better system if I have to continue to do it this way. But hopefully we'll be able to pull it within the Encode system. That's the way it should be. And we're going to examine everything to make sure that hopefully we can do that.
The one thing I've learned, one thing you never want to hire the wrong person. And if you go through a process and you are getting candidates, and if you don't find the right candidate, you don't hire them. You don't hire somebody just to hire somebody.
No.
So we're moving through that process carefully, and we want to get the right person.
But you can fire them too, if they're the wrong person.
Well, yeah, sure you can. But is that a good situation? No.
No, you hate to, but, I just
Then you're taking up.
concerned with the finances. And I think, this is, the budget is the commissioner's duty, and we have to have an understanding, and we have to see that the funds are adequately reviewed and monitored, and just the normal audit process. I don't know, I guess right now with the questions that came off the audit, and the assurance isn't there that it's going to get, I know you're trying, not being critical of you at all. I want answers, and I want to make sure we're doing the best we can, and whatever course we need to do that is taken. If we need to do, in auditing isn't my forte, but if we need to do a special audit quickly to know that here's a number that's going to go forward for 2017 and where we are now, with taking into consideration of the problem of 2016, then I think we need to do that, because we need to have rest that we're not waiting for 2017 audit to do another readjustment and find out that there's more money. It's always good to find out that there's an increase, but not that we've got more to dress down to, because we keep spending based upon the facts, the figures that we had, and at some point we're going to have to cut back. And in what area have we spent that we could have postponed, to do more critical?
I think that by the time we get done with this 27 audit, we're going to have those answers you're looking for, and we're going to have it significantly before the end of the year. That was one thing I stressed to Neil. I know we're going to get started late, but he assured me that they can move right through it. And everybody I've talked to said they move very quickly, swiftly in getting them done. So.
Well, on the Clink project at Penn and Chestnut, it shows us in a deficit.
That is correct.
Is that waiting on KDOT?
Yeah.
Reimbursement?
Matter of fact, they just contacted us today. As you recall, that one had liquidated damages to it. So therefore, they kind of put it on I think it was a 6-month moratorium. Once that's cleared out, I think it had to do with the striping, if I'm recalling correctly on this. That's coming up, so once that's lifted, we can do our final pay request on that.
KDOT has held the funds because of the liquidated damages,
Yes.
and the contractor's contesting it.
I don't know that the contractor's contesting it. From my understanding, talking to Sean and JJ on that, that's just normal course with this type of project. It has to reach that final stage.
I think he wasn't happy with them. The quality of life sales tax, the receipts, is that interest on?
Yes.
Okay. What about, interest there? Are we not getting any interest on the water sewer reserve fund?
So with what has set up, and I haven't changed this from previous administrations, when we get our checking interest in every month, there's a worksheet. I was given the list of funds that interest is divvied up amongst, so not every fund gets that. I don't necessarily agree with it. I just have not changed that at this point in time. But no, that one does not. I don't believe,
Okay.
and it should.
Yeah.
That one along with the 500,000 from Mercy? Is
So
that-
no, the Mercy money that is not included in there. There's you got your housing authority, their funds. There's 911 that's involved in that. Quality of life is involved in that. There is the sewer grinder pump fund
Right.
is involved in that. The general fund. There's one other fund, I can't remember which one. A lot of these funds, particularly our budgeted funds, I think specifically we ought to be attributing interest back over to that. I mean, it's still the same pie. It's just how you split that up. But I've just been working off the system that exists when I got here. That'll be something I'm looking at changing as well. Just get that throughout.
Okay. On the Southeast Lift Station Basin 5, that shows deficit in that. Is that tied to the payments of the lift station loan, or?
Yeah, so that those are final advances that we have made. I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but there were several payment requests that weren't done. That totaled about $600,000 to KDHE. Those have now been made. We just have not received the money yet.
You've applied for the reimbursement?
Yeah.
Because it still showed 1.9 million there.
Outstanding.
And so our loan was $4 million, but
The loan amount, yeah, and that's the balance now. So when we get these reimbursements, you'll see this balance go up. But keep in mind, as soon as we get those reimbursements, this particular loan number that you see right there, if my understanding is correct, they will close that out, and we will reissue a new loan that's clean and it's closed with no more reimbursements, and it's just a straight pay down from there.
so have we paid down from the 4 million to what will be like 2.5?
That'd be about accurate.
Okay. Then the sewer system improvements, that was under the same Kansas Public.
Yep. So that one flipped into the second one. So that first one,
Okay.
it existed. It hit a life cycle,
And
and it ended, and it flipped into this one that's showing a balance there now. The same thing is going to happen with this one, and there will be a new one.
Okay.
We've already executed that agreement, but until we got these final disbursements made, they couldn't close that out. So there will be a new one coming.
Okay. Then the the 2015 ambulance, that's paid for?
Yeah, just made the final payment on it.
Then the money market account, are we getting just interest on it?
Yeah, and actually, those are CDs, and as I explained to you a little bit earlier, until we got, there was a few of those were beginning to mature. Until I got the 2016 audit numbers, I didn't want to tie those monies back up. I wanted to make sure that we had the necessary liquidity in doing that. Now that I've gotten the numbers, we've updated the numbers, I can see where we're at. Best of what information I have available, we're getting ready to put those back out to bid.
Okay.
So
Well,
they were just rolled into a temporary savings account. And then once we roll those out of that and truly close out those CDs, that's when we'll recognize the interest off those.
And that interest will go to, we'll stay with that, will go to,
Mm-hmm.
go to where?
It'll be rolled up into, so let's just say it was a $200,000 CD. The accrued interest was $10,000. So when I do the next CD or whatever the case may be, that new CD will now be $210,000.
Okay.
Or I could capitalize it and put it back into the whatever fund that those specific dollars are tied to.
the ones that are in your savings account, are those the two that are listed as zero balance? The others are still active, the money market and the CD?
No, they're up there in those dollars amount. They're still the CDs. They're just the monies are sitting in there at a savings basis as opposed to the CD rate.
Okay, so the temporary savings account, we don't have any money for the CD and money market account at First Oak and
No.
Commercial. Those
Yeah.
are gone.
Nope.
Okay.
It's all gone.
That's what I was confused where you said they had matured and you cashed them out and they were in
No,
savings.
yeah, we didn't cash them out. They're still there. They just rolled them into a temporary savings account until we were ready to move on those.
Okay. Okay. Oh. Project Reserve Fund. Is that the 5 mil?
Yes.
Okay.
So that should be going up to another $250,000 on top of that.
So
For the-
that number right there represents the 17 money.
Okay.
And keep in mind that through our budget process in 2018, there was $585,000 of general fund capital projects. And given the cash situation that we were projecting and the need of that, we asked the commission and made the recommendation that we use the capital project reserve for those 2 years to support that 2018 general fund capital. Otherwise, we would have had to cut all that out of last year's budget.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though it's still sitting there, and I think this again is where we've had a little bit of confusion, it is sitting there. It truly is sitting there.
It's allocated out to a project.
But we really earmarked it for general fund capital for 2018.
Well, that's where, when we were doing the budget for 2018, I asked about that money. And, as far as I can recall, it was never presented that we want to take that reserve fund and use it for anything else other than streets and truck. So that was a
I'd
misunderstanding.
like to address that. I was going to, under my comments,
Yeah.
but we're bringing it up now, and I would like to address that. A while ago, I read a book called Crucial Conversations. I may have heard of that book. Terrific book. This needs to be a crucial conversation. I feel it's compelled and obligated to respond to some of the comments that were made at the Special Works Commission meeting regarding the fire truck apparatus and these 5 mills. So I want to talk about the 5 mills, and I want to talk about some of those comments. As I said, it's very disconcerting when we're sitting here as staff and a commissioner says, I'm really concerned, almost to the point of being irritated, that we raised 5 mils to raise money for streets and equipment, purchase like this, and now we need it, we don't have the money. We did our job by providing the means for that money to be there, and now it's not there. So I'm thinking, did I miss something? Because I was here when we did the 2018 budget, and talked about the 5 mils. So I did some research. I said, all right, what is that 5 mils exactly for? So I went back to the original meeting when the 2016 meetings for the 2017 budget when it was first put in place. And the direction, there was no vote or anything, it was direction from the commission to consider a 5 mil increase to add reserves for capital expenditures, street work, ADA ramps, and sidewalk repairs. That was the overall direction, basically capital expenditures. And then in that 2016 meeting to adopt the budget, and I will say you were consistent. You talked about the fire truck from day one.
I did.
There's no question about
that
it.
Was our.
But that's not all you talked about. I mean, you talked about other things as well that could be funded from this 5 mils because all departments all departments have specialized needs. We don't want firefighters going into fire without outdated equipment. So you made other comments. It wasn't just, and that's good. I mean, I'm not. That's not a criticism, but just reminding you and
I remember what I said because I remember the discussion. And
Good.
what we talked about was
putting your needs before wants.
Exactly what I said.
And wanted to keep and you wanted to keep the mills at 47 and not increase it to add the property tax, and that's the worthy goal. And then voted on the budget, and you know how you voted on the budget. And then when I came, we had a strategic planning process, as you recall. And one of the goals that came out of there was the fire truck, the ladder truck, replacing the ladder truck. And at that time, we were still looking at a grant for that. We were hoping to get a grant, but in the two funding mechanisms, we put either grant or we would pursue a long-term a lease purchase agreement to buy a ladder truck. That was the direction we got at the time from everybody there. We all agreed on that goal. So then when we went through the budget process, as Mike was just saying, we had to carry, revising the 2017 budget, we put 2017 money into 2018 to cover the capital budget. We laid it out very clearly by fund what that money was going for. And as Mike mentioned, we had in the capital budget $585,000. $270,000, that's all public safety, equipment and vehicles. It's not just equipment, but it's vehicles as well. So I listened to that July 25th budget review session. And again, I looked at it, it was very clear. Mike's presentation said we have to use this $250,000 as revenue in the general fund to cover capital expenditures. And then on August 14th, I looked at that meeting again to make sure, what exactly were we voting on? And again, very clearly, we had a discussion, use it for equipment, for streets, and we had a proposal here. And again, it had expenditures for police and fire and other departments, as needs across the department. So that's how it was proposed. But as you said, and as we said, the money's there. We haven't spent it. We haven't spent it at that time. And this was in 2017, of that $585,000, that was being supported by those 5 mils from 2018 and 5 mils from 2017. We spent 10 minutes talking about that. I thought we made it very clear.
Well, it's obvious that you didn't, because I said
I got the transcript here, Leonard. I can read it to you.
I don't need you to do that because I must have misunderstood it.
Maybe that's so. That's why I'm talking about a crucial conversation. That's why I want to clear the air here, because there's a misunderstanding, because it wasn't just for large capital equipment.
That was, when we discussed it initially, that's what it was. It was for fire truck because
you mentioned
we were not Gary, Fred, and I
And
mentioned.
you mentioned streets, and you mentioned all the
And
other
fire
needs for that,
trucks,
and
because the other funding
a fire
had
truck.
other areas.
But there was no, but when we talked about it, again, we made it very clear, this is what that's paying for.
Well, I figured if this is what we said, then when we approved the 5 mil increase, that's what there. I misunderstood it, but I'll tell you, I won't misunderstand it again.
Well, I hope so. We don't want you to understand
Yeah.
it. We want it to be very clear. Like I said, we spent 10 minutes on it. We
Well,
talked, because we said.
it wasn't presented clear because I wouldn't have approved it if it was not going to stay for the fire truck.
I listened to the videotape again. Budgets, this is just as Commissioner Ususi said, budgets can be difficult.
Yeah.
I understand that. That's why I'm talking about a conversation here, because I wanted to go back and see what
Yeah.
happened, because I felt my
Well, what
integrity was
happened-
attacked here.
No, I didn't attack your integrity at
And-
all because you weren't here when we discussed the 5 mil increase.
That's why I went back and
that's
watched
why I
it.
sent you the emails reference after we
And
discussed
we
it
explained
at
it
the
again and
strategic
talked about it
committee.
again about, and
And
I've
that's
said
why I
twice,
thought-
and I've said twice, and I said it at the last meeting, the money is still there. If you want to direct it to a fire truck, you can do that. We have not spent it. We've spent
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good.
some
'cause
of it,
then when
but
we
we
look
haven't
at the
spent
fire
it.
truck, if it's still there, then that's what we can use it for.
Yeah, we had allocated a program and went through
Mm-hmm.
the process, and that's why, we gave it very clear, laid it out, and
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the meeting, and I got the transcription. We talked very carefully about if you want to go to a fire truck or something, all this will have to be cut out.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like everybody understood that.
Well, I
maybe-
didn't because I heard the fire truck has
That's
been
when we've got a communication problem
We
that
do.
we'll need to address. And like you say,
We do.
you won't misunderstand it this time, because that's how we allocate that. That's why we do it by fund, we do it different
Well,
ways.
Yeah, I
Like
guess
to try
what I
to
didn't
lay it out.
understand, if for 5 years the fire truck has been noted to be replaced, and now we've generated money to replace it, then why would we select not to replace the fire truck?
Because we were still waiting for a grant.
We
and
knew
then-
the grant wasn't coming.
Not when we were preparing the budget, and even then, if we don't get the grant, we set the goal that we would fund it through a lease purchase, which payments wouldn't happen until 2019, so we wouldn't need any of that cash to do that, because that's what was set in the goal. And then in 2018, when we did it, was the very similar thing. We were looking at the same type of purchase, go for grants, but no, we can't go for grants. So we mentioned used as well, but it was but it talked again about a lease purchase process. And now, do we like to do that? No. But I'm not saying that you didn't talk about the fire truck before I got here,
That's right.
after I got here.
That's right.
We talked about streets. Other commissioners talked about streets. But again, it has to be at least 2 votes to get the budget approved, and
Right.
and the budget was passed by everybody after a lengthy discussion on that hot August night, I guess I want to say. So I want to clear the air, because it's when we hear comments like that we're basically. I mean, people watching this meeting, that meeting, may have thought, well, the commissioners did one thing and staff we did whatever we wanted. And that's not the case. And I've never done that in my entire career, and I will never do that. We try to explain it as clearly as we can, and what's covered, and where the revenues are coming. And as I said during the budget hearings, we went through for 3.5 hours, and then we had the wrap up. But I said at the time, we will be happy to meet and go over this budget we'll meet every night if you want to until the budget adoption.
Yeah.
That's our promise. That's my promise to you, and our promise as staff. So it is frustrating to hear that.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's frustrating to be on the other side, too, that I guess when we're said that the $254,000 have been spent by former employees, and yet that we see it in the 2017 ending budget that it's
There
still
was
there.
a misstatement
and-
made about thought it had already been spent, because I had
Yeah.
people ask me, what was it spent on?
Okay, I want to clear this up just a little bit. There had been some reporting about the money had been spent by previous staffs, and I didn't know where the money had been spent at. And I think that came out of was it the April 30th meeting? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When Lewis.
But what was being asked is towards the end of it, you'd asked me, said, "Hey, Mike, I don't know if you know this, but one of the city clerks told me that there used to be an emergency fund."
Right,
And that's
it
what
was
we were.
the-
Yeah,
it
that's
was
what
the
we were
water
talking.
and see, I was trying to go from memory, and
Yeah,
I misidentified that.
Yeah,
That's my fault.
and it had nothing
'Cause
to
it's
do
the
with
water
this
and
5
sewer
million.
reserve fund.
And,
Right.
and this goes clear back into when Paul
Right.
Sass was here, and I didn't know if that fund truly existed or not.
Yeah.
What I did
It
know
was
is
to be used for if a big emergency expense occurred in that department, and that's where my confusion was. But the $5 million, I believe there was a statement made that previous staff or previous administration
no previous staff
had
spent that money.
Spent it 'cause-
that
okay,
would
well, I mean,
not
I
be
see
accurate.
I see it here.
No, it has not been spent, and the previous staff would not have spent that.
But I think
So
maybe
it
that's
is there.
where that confusion lies.
We went back, I think it was back in February, when we were talking about this. And I said, hey, it exists. But and I think I created some confusion at that time as well. Yeah, the money still sits there because I just haven't pulled it over. We haven't used it. We haven't made all those purchases for what we earmarked it for.
Mm-hmm.
We had pulled that money out in 2017, put it in this project reserve fund, as we said that we would. Then through the course of the budget cycle, we realized that we were either going to have to cut out all these general fund capital projects, or we were going to have to utilize that money, and then that's why we came to you through the budget process to do that. So even though I haven't pulled that over yet, the money is spoken for, so to speak, to fund those 2018 capital projects in the general fund.
But
So
again, we can cut that out and spend it on a fire truck, and we eliminate everything else that we allocated or encumbered for. That's your choice. I mean, it's your budget, as I said at the time. It's the commissioner's budget. We propose a budget, and it's your budget. And as we said at the time, we can make all those changes, cut that out, but it'll cut all that equipment, CBAs from fire or whatever, police. We've already purchased the cars, so too late to cut them out, police cars. But we can still do that. But that's, again, you try to have needs, and you mentioned a couple of times during these meetings, I can't remember which one, about the departments have all these needs. Fire department needs CBAs. Parks needs a new vehicle, or a new truck for the hoof stocks or whatever. We have to kind of spread that out, if you will. What I'm saying is, and I want everybody to understand, we did not spend anything that was not a capital expense out of that money. We didn't spend anything different than what's in this capital plan, what we spent so far. We haven't spent it all, as I mentioned. But it's very clear, it didn't go into operations. It's not used for anything else. We play by the rules. That's where it's budgeted, and that's where we'll spend it as needed. But you can change it. You can change it.
That's what's going to have to happen. We keep hearing how this ladder truck needs replaced, how important it is, how critical it is, and then when I hear that, then that takes priority. That's what I'm hearing staff say. That's priority. So then I would accept that to be the top of the list, not going and you're looking at $1 million. Well, use some of this to offset the lease purchase amount.
We said at the time in the budget hearing, you said the very same thing, and we said, yeah, we can do that.
But I didn't think that it was all going to be allocated to other points.
Well, it was laid out there.
Then take the truck, because I figured the truck, because even at the time, we're talking about the grants. We've turned in grants for 4 years, and it's always,
that's why
wish in one hand, and what is that you do in the other, and see which fills up first.
And that's why we set that secondary process of, if we didn't get grants, we would do a lease purchase process where payments wouldn't begin until 2019, when we could plan for that.
Yeah.
We could plan for that, and that's why we didn't say, well, let's take 1 mil or 2 mils of that even, and put it towards the fire, because we'd had that plan. That was,
Well, the
I thought we'd all agreed on it.
The 2019 option, not paying till then, I didn't remember that until we had that used, or that demo truck.
Yeah, we had thrown it out, but because we weren't expending
With the
any-
demo truck?
Yeah, because we weren't actually expending any money. We weren't proposing to expend any money in 2018.
Yeah, that's,
So that's why it was going to be
We
in
didn't budget any
2019,
money.
but we weren't in the 2019 budget process at that point in time. So we just wanted to make, when we did that budget presentation and talk about it, we wanted you to be aware that we were going to be coming to you for authorization to do that based on what we begin doing in 2019 and how we would approach doing that, assuming we didn't get the grant, which we did not do.
So if we reallocate $500,000 out of that $585,000, then we're looking at $85,000 left for capital fund.
well, like I say, we've already
We spent
spent
some of that.
Yeah,
Right.
police
We
cars
probably
and-
looking at just a few thousand
Yeah, that'd be.
dollars out of that.
But
So
that rest
that-
would
well, I
be
mean,
eliminated, so
we-
you want to look through there.
I think we've already spent, in between the police department and the park, I think we've already spent close to $100,000 in the general fund in capital so far, 2018. I can get you exactly on that, but it'd be pretty close to that number.
I guess maybe we need to start looking at.
Well, as we've talked about, it's a difficult thing. I
It-
mean, that's
it
what
is.
we'd
I
love to set
agree.
up, that vehicle replacement fund.
Oh,
That
I'd
would be the
love
best
to have that.
thing sliced bread. We don't have a lot of seed money. You have to start small and build on that. And that's what we plan to do. As we said, when we came here, we were facing the end of 2017, revised budget caused some issues. We had to struggle. We had to defer a lot of stuff to get balanced budget at the end of 2017,
And
going
cut
into
some things.
2018. And we cut stuff out there. But that's our goal. That's our job. We're always trying to be as efficient as possible. But if we have to cut, I mean, my number one goal always is not to raise taxes, property taxes. I mean, that's sometimes, it's inevitable sometimes. But I can only think one time in my career where I raised taxes. It was 2%, and that was a long time ago.
And that, like I said, with the tax increases that we've had in the past, from all the taxing entities, hadn't helped anything. And everybody that have talked to me, they said, well, I don't care how you end up getting this done, but do not raise our property taxes anymore. They're adamant in that. So you're either faced with using your sales tax revenue and splitting that up to start making some of these deferred maintenance projects that we've been doing, but we're real limited as to what we can do even with that. But I think we just need to put our heads together and see what we need and what we no longer don't need.
We do that every year, not only here, but every
Sure.
budget process I've ever been through has been a struggle, because there's always more wants, always more
Sure.
needs
Than money.
than you have. And like everybody in this room, you have to live within a budget, just like your homeowner. An organization has to live within its budget. We don't have growing revenues. We're not increasing property taxes. Sales tax is flat. It's not growing. So we have to find those efficiencies, and that's what we're looking at. And we'll be looking at going through the budget process, because you're right. We can't. I applaud your comments all the time about being needs versus wants, and we got to focus on that and what are the priorities, and that's what we felt we had done going through that process in 2018. We really had to focus on. We had to eliminate a lot of things in 2017, push it into 2018, and what could we do with what we had? Again, knowing that we thought the fire truck was being funded a different way. Be
Yeah,
that
and
as
I
it
thought
may.
it was funded a different way when we talked about budget in 2016. You know, it's like, you know, we've talked about the vehicle replacement fund, and it's obvious what we need is an ordinance to establish that fund, that we put back a certain amount of money from the budget each year, that it goes there to cover those things.
Ordinance or
Then-
resolution or by financial
then-
policy, but you have to stick
Then
to
there
it.
is no, then there's no question about it, because the way we did it didn't work. The way we did in 2016 left too much variation, where I read it one way and everybody else read it somewhat different. And that's what we're at this point, that we still don't have a fire truck. We got a decreasing tax base. We got a piece of equipment that keeps going up, and we can't base paying things on money next year that we might not have, that we're going to have to look at that vehicle replacement firmly, that it's in the budget and it stays for that area instead of a general statement.
And that takes a while, and you have to have discipline, and you have to set it up by vehicle. So you're saying we buy a ladder truck right now, say we bought a new one, you know, we amortize that over the life of that truck, estimated life of that truck, and you put so much in that specific account for that truck.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just one pool account, say, oh, I'm going to buy a pickup, let's go raid the fire truck stuff. You have to be very disciplined in that regarding in a vehicle replacement fund. That's why a lot of cities don't even get involved in that. But it does take a while to build up, unless you've got, you know, $1 million. You can just seed it and go from there. But
Yeah.
we don't have that. Not many cities do.
But we're going to have to come up with a way to make things work with a decreasing population, a decreasing appraisal valuation, and a decreasing sales tax.
Yeah, that's where between the rock and the hard place.
Yeah.
We're pushing that boulder up there. I saw we're pushing that boulder up, and that's the budget process. It's been, and I've been in wealthier communities, I've been in poor communities, and budget time is always a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, and
'Cause
you know,
we're-
the time
and we have a lot of needs here in Independence.
we do.
Amazing, and every department I look at, in facilities, in equipment, in vehicles. So we have to get that priority. What are the priorities? And that's what we tried to do. And we'll work very hard to make it very clear as we go through the process. That's, well, again, we'll spend as much time with the commission. Staff doesn't like to hear that, but
Well, we don't either, because we don't get paid.
that's right. Well, we're on overtime.
Yeah.
We don't get overtime.
Well, you're salaried,
That's
but,
right.
you know, we don't even get that.
Well,
So-
you can change that.
Yeah,
There's
Take that out of line.
yeah.
the problems manifested over a long period of time, and they're not going to be fixed in a short period of time or overnight. It's an ongoing process. It's going to precede your time here, his time here, my time here. It's going to come from people out there that are willing to step up and continue to move in that direction. They have to be very focused and very determined to do that. So people need to understand that. Not miracle workers here.
We just
We've got a lot
want
of
to
issues.
work together. We've
Yeah.
talked about that. We're hoping to work together to make Independence a better community, a better place. I think I've said this before in a community about this size other than this, said people say, oh, it's a nice place to live. And we always said, yeah, we're not finished yet. We got work to do. We can make it even better. And that's what our goal is, to, at least from a city standpoint, in the services we provide the best way we can, the most efficient way we can, and very effective, hopefully at a level of service that the citizens and customers want.
With all your tenure as far as being in different areas of the country, small, big, medium-sized communities, our financial picture looking down the road, years down the road, where do you see us starting to look better Do you see us looking better?
Let me get my crystal ball.
5 years
I
from
left my
now.
crystal
I mean,
ball at the office.
Do you see us potentially looking?
Well, economies
I
are
know everything
cyclical, and
drives all
hopefully with industry coming in, who knows what's going to happen
Sure.
in Coffeyville, and that could stimulate. If sales tax is that elastic revenue, if sales tax picks up from economic development, and that continues to go, that's gonna drive it. Economics is going to drive it,
Yeah,
and
we
that'll
gotta
bring people back to the city.
Yeah, and we got to reach out to industry to save 3 jobs and not be hard-nosed and lose 3 jobs.
I agree.
Cut out for us.
I agree. So anyway, that was my crucial conversation. I don't want to get too far afield, but it was frustrating for us, and I guess obviously frustrating for you, but to hear that kind of thing. So take it in the spirit that it's given. We'll move forward, and we want to.
Well,
Budget time's coming.
Like I said, it won't happen again. I'll see to it that it won't happen again.
Same here.
Okay, city board meeting minutes. Any questions?
No questions on that.
Commission comments?
I'm sure I'll have more questions for you concerning the quarterly financial statements. There'll be more questions, so
Absolutely.
I'll email them through Craig, and he can get them to you, and we can get answers, because I'm sure there's people that have a better understanding than I do.
Sure.
Will have more pertinent questions that I can bring forth.
Absolutely.
I think we went over everything except, I think the sale of Building D, the party, they're still interested in looking at the building. Have they contacted you or anything?
Which
The one, they're a healthcare entity.
Oh, the one out of Topeka? Yeah, I've talked to them, it was about a week, it was last week, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he said he would talk, he said, yeah, we're still interested, we're looking, maybe doing this and that, let me talk to my CEO and I'll get back to you next week, and I haven't heard back from him yet, but he said they were still interested.
Yeah, okay.
So
Because-
that's good.
Yeah, I heard that they are still interested, and I think they were having 25 jobs.
We didn't get into that
Yeah.
far. I was just trying to find out if they were still interested and had any interest at all. And he talked about having some regional things here that he felt that they felt weren't being served very well. Certain types of health care stuff that wasn't being served in this area as well. That they could fill that niche.
Yeah, I had contact with one of the individuals that was associated with them.
He had originally talked about a payroll of about $1.1 million, somewhere around $1 million, 25 or 26 jobs at 45,000.
He did ask me what we wanted for the building.
And he was looking at.
I said, I can't tell you that.
He did say something about, like you had mentioned about additional services they felt were lacking in the community they could provide, but I think they were initially looking at around 14,000 square feet to begin with. And so I'm hoping those would be good paying jobs, and then that would create other jobs in relationship to supporting that facility. So I hope we get moving on that, and we can have that happen.
Next item then, public concerns. We have Debbie Miller.
For decades, the city has been run under the archaic trust and follow the advice of city staff philosophy. And for decades, the majority of commissioners have faithfully adhered to that philosophy. However, taxpayers have only to consider the new debt, new rate increases, and other considerable expenditures that have been piled up on their backs by city for over the last 8 years to conclude that philosophy has been a dismal failure that has needed to be replaced by a newer and far more effectual one. Over the last 8 years, taxpayers have seen thousands of tax dollars wasted due to city staff's helter-skelter, still no plan approach to city facilities improvements. Taxpayers have spent $700,000 tax dollars supporting the Tajma City Hall money pit due to city staff's recommendations that the city accept and relocate to it. $700,000 tax dollars that could have been spent on life-saving hook and ladder trucks for 9,000 people. Taxpayers have coughed up $8 million tax dollars due solely to city staff's failure to make mandated ADA improvements and to properly maintain critical water facilities in the former City Hall. Taxpayers have endured enormous water and sewer rate increases, with more to follow, due to city staff's recommendations that resulted in years of illegal rate increases, followed by the mismanagement of the revenues collected from those increases. As a result of commissioners blindly trusting and following the advice of city staff, taxpayers have had over $10 million in new debt, new rate increases, and other tremendous and avoidable expenditures heaped upon their backs over the last 8 years. Over $10 million that could have been spent on city facility improvements and other pressing needs of the city. Some members of this commission have chosen to try a different philosophy of city governance, which has already resulted in responsible decisions being made in the best interest of the city and its taxpayers. However, one has only to attend commission meetings to sense city staff has been fighting to preserve the ineffectual and financially catastrophic trust and follow the advice of city staff philosophy. If the city and its taxpayers are ultimately going to claw their way out of the deep and disgusting abyss dug by decades of commissioners following a flawed philosophy, a new philosophy must be adopted, and childish territorial disputes must be replaced with complete cooperation between city staff and commissioners. For the first time in years, taxpayers have a glimmer of hope that their city leaders will make responsible decisions that are truly in their best interest. They can only hope that glimmer isn't dashed because of a petty and juvenile territorial dispute that serves absolutely no one well.
Thank you. No other business, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.